Today's meeting of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is called to order on October 11th, 2022. Welcome, everyone. Following adjournment of this meeting, I will call to order a meeting of the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board. The agendas for both of today's meetings are on the wall at the entrance to chambers, and please remember to turn off your cell phones. To ensure a complete record of the board's actions, we ask that each individual wishing to speak clearly state your name and spell your last name for the clerk. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. I would now ask the board members to introduce themselves and identify the fields they represent. We'll start with Bruce.
Bruce Rector, I'm a member of the Community Development Board for the City of Clearwater.
Kathleen Beckman, I'm a member of the Clearwater City Council. Robin Field, residential lending.
Kevin Schnall, representing the nonprofit industry.
Peter Scalia, representing the homeless.
Carmen Santiago, representing the people.
Pierre Cornoyer, residential contractor.
Gabriela Camacho, representing Affordable Housing Builder.
And I am your board chair, Camille Hepting. I represent employers in Clearwater. So item 2.1 is approval of minutes. There's a set of meeting minutes, but there's also a meeting summary from last meeting. To make sure that we're all on the same page, please understand that you are being asked to approve the minutes, not the lengthier summary. May I have a motion to approve minutes from the September 13th meeting?
I'll second the motion.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Item 3.1 is our housing incentives program. Amanda Warner, professional planner with Wade Trim, will lead today's discussion. Before I call Ms. Warner to the podium, I'd like to call up Chuck Lane, Assistant Director of Economic Development and Housing. Mr. Lane was unable to attend our first meeting in September. He's had a chance to watch the meeting and would like to address the board to provide some feedback.
So thank you. Chuck Lane, Assistant Director of Economic Development and Housing Department. I regret missing the last meeting. I think it's the first advisory board meeting I've missed since I've been on the seat. I was at a National Community Development Conference in Augusta, Georgia. The NCDA does a great job advocating for local government. It was a very good conference. Wouldn't have missed if it wasn't for a worthwhile cause. In watching the meeting after the fact, I just wanted to comment on some things that I heard the board discuss, because I think some of my input is pretty valuable to the direction you all go. So first of all, and I think this will be a quick one, Mr. Cornway, you talked about our land inventory, and it's pretty weak, right? And I understand that, but there aren't any other properties. The city, what we did is every 3 years we're required to look at our land holdings and decide which ones are appropriate for affordable housing and put them on that list, right? So it's kind of timely this year because our real estate services coordinator was doing an analysis of all city-owned property for potential surpluses. So we worked together and we evaluated every piece of dirt that we own, and that's what we have. Now there are some properties along North MLK that are commercially zoned that are not on that list, because I think it's more important that we kind of liven that commercial corridor with new development along that corridor, so that those aren't chosen for affordable housing. But that's the list. I know it's not pretty, but there aren't any other city-owned properties or CRA-owned properties that we can add to that list. We exhausted all of them. So I just want to make you aware of that. Okay? There were some things you all wanted to agenda at a later NAHAB meeting. Just want to confirm that we'll still do that. One of them was a down payment assistance discussion.
Yes.
At our next NAHAB meeting, I'll ask Ms. Terry Malcolm-Smith to put together a presentation for you all. I'm sure Ms. Field and Ms. Dykes Harrison will have a lot of input in that, as well as the rest of the board. That would be a good discussion for us. Good morning, Ms. Rivera. There was a question about are our incentives effective? We can agenda that at a NAHAB meeting. I'll do some research, and we'll talk about the incentives from this board. We'll probably do that after this meeting, after the AHAC work is done. But that's a good discussion to have. Talked about having the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee year-round. We've bantered that about back and forth. That's a policy decision. It's, I think Ms. Sanderson summed it up very quickly, very perfectly last time. This AHAC, we leave it to the statutory required function, and that's what you do. Can we just combine it all into one board? We could, and that would be up to the board, up to the city council to do that. So we can certainly talk about that more. And then one last thing was, you talked about the meeting times. We don't have a lot of public comment. should we move the meetings to the evening? I actually spoke with our clerk about that, and her opinion is it really doesn't move the needle. We moved our Parks and Rec advisory meetings to the evening for the same reason, and it didn't seem to add comment. People show up when they have an issue. People don't show up when they don't. But if it pleases the board, we can talk about it further. So we can talk about that more at another NAHAB meeting. One discussion that I really wanted to weigh in on was you talked about requiring development, a set-aside of a number of units in affordable housing, right? Really what that is and how you implement that as local government is through inclusionary zoning, okay, where you have a rule that if you develop X amount of projects, X amount of units, and typically there's a minimum number of units, then you have to set aside Y% for affordable housing, like 10%, right? So that's, it's done throughout, in different places throughout the country. Some places it works on a voluntary basis. When it works on a voluntary basis, it's because added density is a good incentive for that. Our density boost doesn't really seem to incentivize that type of thing because really where we're seeing the product come out of the ground, we're already zoned at 30, 35, 50 units an acre. And developers don't want to go beyond that because if you go beyond 35 units an acre, now you have to build structured parking. Now that completely blows up your finances. So we're not seeing the density boost be an incentive to that. So the other way with inclusionary zone is to make it a requirement, okay? If we make it a requirement, there is a Florida law that states the local government needs to offset the cost to that developer for making those units. So we have to be really careful about a recommendation for that to go to council because, we don't know where that cost would come from. We don't know what that cost is. I had a really good discussion after the state conference, I know Ms. Beckman attended, with Stephen Beal. Stephen Beal is a finance guy, very, very sharp guy. He works with Florida Housing. He is the board chair for the Pinellas County Housing Finance Authority. Used to be an investment banker, and now he does finance in our world, affordable housing. He talked about ways that we could potentially look at our incentives and quantify them and put a value to them, and that value would contribute to the offset that we would have to make. So there's some analysis that I plan to do with Mr. Beal that might lead us in a direction where we could reasonably recommend inclusionary zoning. I think there's more work that needs to be done on it. I think you had a great discussion. I think inclusionary zoning would be an outstanding tool. What you don't want to do is there's two things. We got to be careful of the cost, and we got to understand what that cost is, and we don't want to deter development. We don't want people, not developing in Clearwater because of our rules. People say there's no one answer to this affordable housing crisis. Well, there really actually is one answer, and that's if we had a supply-demand balance. That's not going to happen anytime soon. That's 10 years down the road. But if we deter development, we're going to kick it down the road even further. So we just have to be careful about those things. It was a great discussion. I think, you guys are on the right track with what you're discussing. And I will turn it over. Well, unless you have any questions for me, I will turn it over to Amanda. Yes.
I have some questions. I appreciate you watching the meeting. It was a really good meeting, and then weighing in, Chuck. I value your opinion. There are a couple of things, and I'll start with the last one that you mentioned. Florida law does require government needs to offset the cost of that requirement of inclusionary zoning, right?
Yes.
So we're talking about mixed income housing developments,
Right.
and whether or not we value that. And we had a really engaging conversation about that at the last meeting. And I'm certainly not naive that there's a cost, and where are we going to find those dollars? And so we can have a presentation from Stephen Beal. He's a friend of mine. I certainly respect him as well about creative ways to find the money. But I think we also would want to have a presentation from someone who talks about the societal benefits of mixed income housing. And what are those benefits that might not be, listed in a ledger sheet? And really understand the need for that and the pros and cons of it. So, I'm a big proponent of that. I think there's a lot of value in it. But again, you do need to know the numbers, and you need to know where your where your values are articulated in the decisions that you make. The other thing was, should we move meetings to the evening? And in speaking with the clerk or whatever person you spoke to about it really does not move the needle. And I would say, obviously, right now, I don't know how many residents we have in the audience. I only know one person that might be a resident that I don't. One? We've got one? Thank you for being here. But I will say that last Thursday, there was a community meeting held at the North Greenwood Rec Center, and I believe it was sponsored by the League of Women Voters and moderated by the NAACP of North Pinellas. And Bruce, you were there. It was a packed room. It was focused on affordable housing crisis in our community, what can be done, what are levers, and what are people experiencing. And so well over 60 people, don't you think? People telling their personal stories. We had experts on the panel, so it wasn't put on by the city. And it was a packed house, so people care. And what did it? I went after our council meeting, because we had a council meeting at 6, and then by the time I got over there, I think it was 7:15, 7:30. What, did it start at 6:30-ish?
Yes.
Okay. And it was a full house.
Yeah.
So people will show up, I think, in the evening. They care about this.
Can I say something? I do agree with Ms. Kathleen Beckman. There are people that do care and they do want to get involved. They do want to participate in the community, but the timing keeps them from showing up to the 9 o'clock meetings here.
So we'll talk about it more, and I'll agenda it. We'll talk about it more. The clerk also did say we could have a better use of our e-comment system, and that would be another way that people, and we do make that available now. Whether people know about it well enough, maybe we could do a better job at that.
Right.
So that's something we could look at as well. So.
And this is on a further slide, but I would say as well is, right now we're all summer we had some comprehensive plan feedback throughout community meetings. We had the Affordable Care Act, ARPA fund distribution meetings, and right now we're a full court press on the referendum meetings, and we have those out plastered all over social media, everything, to get people to show up and get informed about that referendum. I don't know how many attempts to inform the public of our AHAC meetings. I'd love to see the analytics about how we're advertising these meetings and informing people and engaging them. Again, as Carmen says, it's tough to come at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. But again, I think we can hopefully step up our game to inform the public, invite them, and meet them where they're at.
One thing I failed to mention, Mr. Scalia asked the question, how many units have we produced since 2017? The answer is 854, most produced leveraged. That's between down payment assistance, homeowner rehab, new homes that have been constructed, rental rehabs, and new rental product. During COVID, our numbers went down a lot with construction. You can see them bouncing back a little bit. We typically do, between 15 and 20 rehabs a year. During COVID, we did 9 in those 2 years. We did 9 one year, 0 another. I mean, COVID really affected our production, but we work it as best we can with the programs that we have. So I think our staff does a really good job, part of our team. So if you have no other questions.
Can I, one follow-up question to those 854 produced since 2017? Can you provide us those numbers in the different columns? How many were rental rehabs or?
39 down payment assistance loans, 62 homeowner rehabs, 40 new single-family homes, 451 rental rehabs, leveraging there, and 262 new rental units, most of which have come through the tax credit program, through 3 projects.
Great, thanks.
Okay? All right, I'll turn it over to Amanda. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
it on the screen in front of the podium? Okay.
Yes.
Can everybody see it? Okay, all right, great. My name's Amanda Warner. I'm a planner for Wade Trim, a consultant to City of Clearwater, assisting with the local housing incentive strategy update process for 2022. So just to give you a refresher on where we are in the process, we are at the AHAC meetings to update the LHIS report between September and October. On November 7th, we'll be moving forward to the public hearing to approve the updated LHIS report. Then on December 1st, hopefully we'll be on the City Council agenda to have that incorporated into the LHAP document and move forward towards getting this submitted to the state for the SHIP program. So,
Can I ask a question about that?
yes,
Thank you.
yeah, sure.
So I was looking, so the so we're right here, September, October of 2022.
Correct.
November 7th is a Monday,
Yes, that's correct.
so we hold a public hearing. Is that in the morning, in the evening?
I'll defer
Scheduled to be at 9 a.m.
on the time.
9 a.m. on a Monday? Okay, so we're going to have a public hearing to approve this LHIS report. What happens after, let's assume we have people who show up and offer public comment. What happens after we receive that public comment?
So that public comment would be incorporated into the document. So anything that we hear during that public hearing would be incorporated and carried forward to the City Council meeting. So my understanding is if there were comments received, you all would vote to include those comments or address those comments at the public hearing, and then that would be carried forward into the version that's presented to City Council for their approval.
Okay, so we do the shaping right there as they stand up and use their 3 minutes, and then we shape it and then move on?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And then, so that meeting on November 7th would be the AHAC deciding to approve the LHIS for transmittal to the City Council for them to hear it. Then City Council would be the one ultimately adopting the LHIS for inclusion into the LHOP or Local Housing Assistance Plan, which is the larger document. That's the reporting document submitted for SHIP annually.
The reason it's on a Monday is because Tuesday's election day.
Right, right. But do you think we should move it to an evening to encourage more people to attend?
I would defer again to city staff on that.
I can't answer that right now. You know, there's a lot of work that goes into these meetings, they're broadcast. I'd have to check with the city clerk on that. I can't schedule staff that I don't control. So I can ask the question, Ms. Beckman, and communicate the answers through email
Okay.
with the board.
Okay, so,
Amanda, when council accepts the AHAC, is that, I'm trying to remember if that's a required public hearing?
yes, so so City Council would be a public hearing to accept the LHIS report and approve it for inclusion in the Local Housing Assistance Plan and then transmittal to the state. So that's essentially what City Council is.
So that wouldn't be a consent item, that would be presented on Thursday evening at council. Does that satisfy your thoughts on, would you still like to see the third AHAC meeting in the evening?
Well, I just think when we have a public hearing and invite people to comment on the document that we're working on and shaping, we should have some means to incorporate that feedback and modify or shape that document further based on public comment. And if the public comment is going to be on December 1st and the report is due by the 31st, you know, is there an opportunity after that Thursday night meeting on December 1st, the council meeting, is there an opportunity to continue to shape it?
I think council could, no, I believe council accepts the document. They don't necessarily approve all of the recommendations, they accept it. And I think council could accept that document with modifications. Council's done that before.
Accept it, but they don't see the modifications.
Well, I think, correct, they would instruct us what those modifications should be, and we would.
And then go
We
make
would go
those
write them.
specific
Yeah.
modifications.
If you want me to,
I
Denise?
should mention the e-comment component for the November 7th. And we could push out on Nextdoor and other comments as well. So if we're not able to reschedule that November 7th meeting to an evening, that would be a way to receive comments.
Can you repeat that?
Just suggesting the e-comment.
I can hear you, but nobody else can. I'm not talking to a microphone.
I don't think that
Sorry
mic's
about
working. That's a problem. Is that mic working?
What?
Is that mic not working?
I don't know how to work it.
Oh,
So Pat, I'm just suggesting that the
Oh, I
e-comment
hear you.
feature
I hear you.
be turned on.
she wants you to come up to the podium.
Television audience.
The three people.
Yeah, so Pat, I'm just suggesting, of course, that we utilize the e-comment feature to solicit those comments for the November 7th meeting, should it not be rescheduled. Obviously, if it is rescheduled, we'll still encourage that feature so that people can make comment on the document.
I think that sounds like a good idea. Thank you.
Have we had much success of people making comments on e-comment? Yes?
I believe your question was about encouraging people to comment on e-comment.
Yeah, like, do we have success? Like, do people really go through that media and make comments?
People do in the council meetings. It's been utilized. I don't know it's been utilized here. We actually have a comment for the AHAC that came in to me through an email that Ms. Sullivan will read into the record at the appropriate time. So, you know, we do have means for people to submit comment. They know they can, people know they can submit comment to me, people that know me and throughout the community. But, you know, to Ms. Sanderson's point, we could push that a little bit more and make it more, the public more aware of that e-comment option. And I think we can definitely do that.
And Chuck, if we were to get a comment, so we could technically right now, somebody could be watching this meeting and making a comment, like, would it be an instant thing that we would receive that the clerk, no?
There's a cutoff.
Okay,
It can be 24 hours before the meeting, can be the morning of the meeting, but there is a cutoff. So
okay,
it's not a live interaction at the meeting.
okay.
Okay, so, given the schedule moving forward, if you recall, and I think Councilmember Beckman, Councilmember Beckman referenced the principals slide that we had talked about last time. We had quite a few comments and considerations regarding this slide. Essentially, we started with 5 principles. And in here, I've made some edits. These are just purely for discussion. These may not be the edits that we go with today, but I just wanted to give you something to respond to, given the conversation that we had during the last meeting. Starting with principle number 1, we said affordable over the long term. There were no changes to that particular principle. 2, we had diverse supply that provides for a mix of income levels and the diverse needs of residents. This one we had quite a bit of discussion about in terms of mixed income housing. We had ultimately resulted in a suggestion to change or add principle number 6. So we added principle number 6 below, incorporate affordable housing into all non-affordable housing developments. Given the input that Chuck provided earlier today, our suggestion would be to adjust that to say incentivize the incorporation of affordable housing into all non-affordable housing developments or something similar to that effect. Does anybody have any suggestions regarding the wording of number 6? Yeah.
I'm okay with incentivizing, but I would say incentivizing affordable housing into all housing developments. You know, we don't need the non-affordable, right, and just into all housing developments.
Okay, is everybody okay with that wording into all
Yeah.
housing developments? Okay, great, all right, okay, that takes care of that one. So we'll move forward with that addition of a number 6 at the bottom.
You have a comment?
I think I heard, sorry Pat, I can't get this to work. I think I heard you say incentivize affordable housing. So you're suggesting that we change the word from incorporate to incentivize, is that correct?
Well, you recommended incentivize instead of incorporate based on the financial requirements of the state.
I'm sorry, I thought that the recommendation was incentivize the incorporation
Yes.
of.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what it was, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So it would be incentivize the incorporation of affordable housing into all housing developments. Okay, good. All right, so that'll be the new number 6 principle. Going back up, sorry for that, jumping down to the bottom, but I just wanted to hit that was an extension of number 2, and the conversation started on the second principle. So we'll have the number 6, new principle, and then going back up to number 3, we had some rewording of this one to say designed to be sustainable, energy and cost efficient, and to minimize physical barriers to accessibility. And I think that stemmed from a conversation about well-designed being too vague, and maybe we wanted to put some more parameters in there. So is everybody comfortable with that wording? Okay, great. All right, and then number 4, we had a bit of a discussion about character, what that meant, whether that meant the type of the building, the size of the building, so forth. I think our conversation resulted in maybe a focus on aesthetic character, so we just added one word in there, aesthetic. Everybody okay with that one? All right, okay. And then number 5, no changes. We'll keep that as strategically located and pedestrian-oriented with access to mass transit, open spaces, educational institutions, and employment or workforce training opportunities. So with that, we will continue these affordable housing principles, make modifications to number 3 and number 4, and then add a new number 6, edited as discussed today. All right, so the affordable housing vision, we had actually tabled discussion of this until after we refined those principle statements. Given the principle statements, we just added a few adjustments to this. So we have the City of Clearwater will encourage the development of a diverse supply of housing that is safe, affordable, sustainable, and energy and cost efficient, that blends into the aesthetic character of all the city's neighborhoods, proximate to public amenities and employment opportunities, which supports an inclusive community and the diverse needs of residents. We added the energy and cost efficient and aesthetic descriptors. I did not add the mixed income because I felt that fell under the inclusive community statement, inclusionary zoning and that nature, so inclusive community. Does everybody feel comfortable with that wording with the adjustment?
I have
Yes.
just one suggestion with the word encourage. I would think maybe the word incentivize is a little stronger instead of encourage. Can we put incentivize? City of Clearwater will incentivize the development of?
Yes, we can definitely do that, yeah. Okay. All right, so now it'll read, the City of Clearwater will incentivize the development of a diverse supply of housing that is safe, affordable, sustainable, and energy and cost efficient, that blends into the aesthetic character of all the city's neighborhoods, proximate to public amenities and employment opportunities, which supports an inclusive community and the diverse needs of residents. All right. Hearing no more comments, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So we had homework from September 13th, and it was to review the prior 2021 LHIS report, evaluate each recommendation in that report, and then consider whether each recommendation should be continued, modified, or removed. We also asked that you identify any new affordable housing incentives not addressed by the 2021 recommendations. So just as a refresher, last meeting we talked about affordable housing strategies, that they could be barriers or incentives, and that there were specific incentives that we needed to consider by Florida statute, and those were expedited review process, modification of fees, flexible densities, infrastructure capacity, accessory dwelling units, parking reductions, flexible lot configurations, modification of street requirements, pre-adoption policy consideration, the inventory of public lands, and proximity to transportation, employment, and mixed-use development. We also talked about the initiated, or AHAC-initiated incentives, which were adaptive reuse, land development code, communication and marketing, financing, and partnerships. So in review of those and the committee's discussion from October 13th, there were several barriers or incentives at our current priorities. One was the size of city-owned properties, which Chuck referenced in his presentation this morning. Alternative housing types or co-housing, consideration for those. The issue of investor real estate and short-term rentals. Down payment loans, assistance loans, and the length of time for inspections and closings, homeowner insurance and property taxes, which are really third-party barriers, and then federal assistance and grants. So these were some of the barriers and incentives we talked about on September 13th, that's a typo. So I wanted to start with expedited review. This is the first statute required incentive. So we have recommendation 1.1. I'm not going to read all of the recommendation. Hopefully you looked at these in your homework. But recommendation 1.1, is there a recommendation to continue, modify, or remove this specific recommendation?
Let's continue.
Continue? Okay. All right, great.
Can I ask I had a question about this one.
Yes.
I was just wondering if it's being done. I mean, so we have Pierre, right? Pierre and Gabby are here, so are things working the way they should as far as expedited review? I mean,
I haven't, applied for affordable housing, but I'm satisfied with the review process.
okay.
It's not.
It's not?
No, it's not. We don't receive reviews within 4 days of permit submission, so.
I didn't hear that.
It's not working.
Okay.
We don't receive any review comments within the 4 days, so.
Okay.
So there's a concern about the timing then, or
Yeah.
how long the review comments come back? Okay.
One, I think it's difficult because the recommendation is written in a way that when we say continue to strive to complete reviews, that means they have to make an effort to get to that 4 days, but it doesn't really guarantee that 4-day period. And
Yeah,
I think that's a
exactly.
conversation we had last year also, to say, can we change the verbiage so that it says that we need to guarantee that those reviews are completed within 4 business days? And I don't recall what the outcome of that was.
Yeah, we discussed this last year too,
Okay.
about changing the wording because,
Right.
I think it was, let me see. There was a wording that didn't specify that
Right.
they were actually committed to do the 4 days.
And if I recall, we used to not even have 4 days in there. I think that's one of the modifications we made last year, is that we included the number of days to be a little bit more specific.
Yeah.
But if those 4 days if that 4 day is not being met, we definitely have to have a conversation about this.
We did, the statement was more vague last year.
Yeah, yeah.
And following the discussion of the committee, we put a target turnaround time there of 4 days.
Okay.
And that can be a challenge with, our number of permits that have gone up, and I know it's lessened a little bit, but you were in a position, Gina, where we were getting just inundated with applications and staffing levels, so that ebbs and flows, how easy that is to accommodate.
We have had challenges meeting our deadlines. We've had record number of permits, like 1,100 a month. So it's been crazy busy. The one thing that we also have talked about with certain affordable housing providers is to get a set of plans or multiple set of plans that are their model on file with us so that we review them, get them approved. So when they submit, the review is like that. And I don't think yet we have received that. So I think, to partner with us so that we can get better turnaround if anyone is building, the same plan over and over and over again. It would be helpful, I think, to expedite things if we could also do that. So I think that would be a positive move. And again, also we need to make sure that they're getting with Chuck to file the appropriate paperwork so our staff knows it's an affordable housing project that is subject to expedited review. Because sometimes we don't know. So that would be helpful too.
So would it be helpful if we changed this verbiage to include something along the lines of what Gina mentioned, saying that there's a way to expedite the process by submitting plans ahead of time, or to filing these plans basically with the city of Clearwater, with that department. I think we still need to address this, because if we want to be the city that affordable housing developers come to because we have a better process, we have to make sure that, something is being done at this level, I think.
So pre-submitting a set of plans, that would really only be applicable for single-family homes,
Right.
right? And we only have a couple of organizations that build that often in Clearwater.
Right.
I've spoken with both organizations about, hey, let's get your plans on file, let's get them pre-approved. And we just haven't gotten there yet, they haven't been submitted. But Habitat is probably, the most obvious. You guys do a lot of work in Clearwater, and you have a handful of models that you work from, right?
Yeah,
So if we get them on file, that'll make, the work that Gina's team does, it'll make it an easier review process. Tampa Bay Neighborhood Housing Services, now formerly Clearwater Neighborhood Housing Services. They do enough work in our city where we could do the same thing with them, and perhaps Suncoast Housing Connections. But other than that, to have that language generally in here that only applies to just a small number of developers, it may not work, because I communicate that to them directly.
so Chuck, if I understand right, so if we present to the city of Clearwater 4 prototypes, which it would be just the house, not the site plan, because obviously they're not site-specific, who do we submit those prototypes to?
Gina's group.
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion? Why can't we just reword this a little bit that says something to the effect of, to ensure or to assist in your 4-day review, with an asterisk, we need the following documents submitted prior to, from the builders, from the developers, so that they are getting that stuff to the city, so that the city does have the stuff on file.
Well,
and that way it's, it moves it along.
Like I said, though, that only applies to
Yeah.
maybe 3 developers in the entire city. It may add confusion to the statement, because it wouldn't apply to multifamily product, because you can't just cookie cutter multifamily product generally.
And I just wanted to point out, the committee already has a recommendation 1.5, pertaining to the template plans and pre-screening of a building permit application. So that is already in here. It's just a separate recommendation, not under that 1.1. And this, again, is specific to, I believe, housing developers of single-family homes, as was mentioned. So for number 1.1, let me get back up there.
It's really just about the form is what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So this particular recommendation is more specific to the form and initiating the process.
So is there a way that we can guarantee that affordable housing projects that are being submitted with the request for expedited permit processing for affordable housing activity are going to be reviewed within 4 days, yes or no?
Guarantee?
I mean, we'll do our best and put you at the front of the line.
And just to be clear, I mean, when we talk about to the front of the line, I mean, we're talking about, are we talking about fewer than 10 single-family homes a year? Pretty much in the city of Clearwater?
Yeah, we're doing
I mean,
a lot going on now. It's probably a little bit more, but yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood,
so it's this is not hundreds out of the thousands you're getting. And so one thing I noted was kind of like to have and I am the biggest advocate for more staff in this city so that our workers aren't worked to the bone and get paid and we can retain them and hire. But anyway, it still doesn't, putting that aside, that's another argument. This is about best practices. And I was wondering about having, in an ideal world, kind of a mentor or patient advocate. When somebody goes into a hospital, sometimes they're assigned a patient advocate that follows them through the whole thing. And ideally, we would have everybody who's doing any kind of affordable development, from single to multi or whatever, has your assigned advocate who's going to hold your hand throughout the process and just move you to the front, and it's just going to be, it's premier service, the red carpet for anyone who comes to Clearwater with affordable housing. Obviously, Gina and Chuck, you guys don't have the resources yet, right? But ideally, it would fast track and make it smooth to make everything happen.
What I'm hearing too is the comment that Chuck made earlier. He said, the people that know me know to come to me for these things. We have to think about the people that don't. We have to think about the people that we don't currently have as affordable housing developers. We need to think of the people that want to create affordable housing developments, that are looking at the cities that have the best incentives and the best, turnaround time and review times and all these things. So we have to think a little bit outside of what we've always done, in terms of, you know, who can be, because right now, that advocate that you're talking about is Chuck. But Chuck is not always going to be available, depending on how big, you know, everything is. So my question to the board, and I guess to the staff, is can we change the verbiage here to say guarantee to complete reviews of single-family permit reviews within 4 days, if that form is present?
I would just combine the last two sentences to make them one. You've already got prioritize or give priority in the second sentence, and that you would just, instead of continue to strive, you would put projects submitted with this form will receive priority during the permit review process by completing reviews of single-family permits within 4 days.
I think that's right, yeah.
Just
I
take
think
out
that's good.
continue to strive. And
Yep.
I don't like the word guarantee because, as Ms. Clayton has shared, I mean, they have staffing fluctuations, and it's just hard to ensure that they will do that every time. But I think if we tied those two sentences together, it makes it clear that that's the expectation.
Everyone agrees? Okay with that?
Everybody comfortable with that change? Okay, all right, so what we will do is we will combine the second and third sentence and have it read, projects submitted with this form will receive priority during the permit review process by completing reviews within 4 days of the initial submittal and within 3 days of all subsequent submittals.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, so that's recommendation 1.1. We'll move on to 1.2. So ultimately, just to summarize that, we decided to modify that recommendation. 1.2, this is regarding the Assistant Director of Economic Development and Housing and Permit Manager continuing to be the primary and secondary points of contact, and then through close coordination, doing the following actions to facilitate affordable housing. Regarding recommendation 1.2, which continues on to second slide, is the direction to continue, modify, or remove this recommendation. Yes?
Can we change the words should to will? The housing and permit manager will continue to be, it's just a little stronger than should, the shoulds. There's two of them. And these two staff positions will, because they're already doing it, right? It's ongoing.
Does the entire committee agree with that?
Yes.
All right, any other comments regarding 1.2?
I'd like to have these projects public-facing. I think the city of Orlando has on some, webpage related to housing, kind of a tracker of projects that are in a proposal stage or review stage or implemented or to be implemented in this year. But, ideally, and I know our website is and different departments are undergoing some changes, but to be real forward-facing with where we're at and what's queued up. And
We're working on a dashboard.
are you good?
Yeah, and it's taken some time. It can't be a priority of the things that we do, all the things we do, but we're trying to get it to a point where it won't take a lot of staff time to keep updating it.
Right.
So what we'll do is we'll have a 5-year look back at all of our accomplishments, which will be stagnant, won't need to be updated, and then we'll update the current year information as we move along. And then the next year there'll be a new 5-year update. So it's something that we want people to know, really what we're achieving, generally, and with some specifics. We don't want to call it addresses. We don't want to advertise, where the low income.
Oh, no, just
but
number of.
So there's nuances there we got to be careful about, but we're putting it together. We're working on it. Hopefully, it'll be something that's attractive to the eye and people.
Yeah, and we got to celebrate that. I mean, that's a lot of hard work, and the numbers you went through at the very beginning in those categories need to be forward-facing. So when people say, I don't know what the city's doing, it's like, go here, look at what we've done, what we've created, and
And I think that falls under the 14, which is the additional recommendation, communication marketing, because that would be the forward-facing, to
Yep.
your point.
Yep. Really celebrating it.
Right, so what I'm hearing is for recommendation 1.2 is to continue as is, but then noting that that dashboard is really covered under a later recommendation regarding marketing and
I
communication.
think you had the one comment, should to will.
Yes.
Yes, I have that too. Yeah, my apologies. Yes. So the first sentence will read, the Assistant Director of Economic Development and Housing and Permit Manager will continue to be the primary and secondary points of contact. So my apologies, that will be modified with that one correction.
And then the last should right before the colon, these two staff positions will, blah, blah,
Yes.
blah. Okay.
There's 2 wills, yeah.
Two wills, okay. All right. Okay. So recommendation 1.2 will be modified with the 2 corrections of the shoulds to wills. So recommendation 1.3, continuing to approve customer service toward potential project applicants by, and then we have a list of actions to improve customer service. Do we want to continue, modify, or remove?
Continue.
I was wondering if we'd want any measurables on that fourth bullet.
Yeah.
Utilizing new technology, because we had talked last year up here, I think, about having this, Pete had mentioned this big come-together of developers and the city and have a forum and, and so when we have, by means of link sharing web, web forums, videos, webinars, virtual meetings, forums, and other tools, do we want to have that annually? What can we do to hold ourselves accountable there? A measurable, anything?
I think this one is tough to modify just because every year is going to be different. And, just take the example of COVID, right? When there's other priorities that
Yeah.
we don't want to put something in there that then becomes a problem because we can't meet it.
And it should be ongoing,
Right.
particularly with technology, changing every day, so. Opportunities are changing every day. So.
I guess, but I think an annual webinar or forum, the city of Clearwater holds an annual webinar or forum that, communicates to developers as well as residents.
Maybe we just add at least once annually at the end of that sentence to.
Yeah, we're strapped with staff. So, I'm looking at it from 2 ways as far as what's realistic with what we're dealing with staff right now and what we want, philosophically here,
Right,
what's
right.
best.
Any other feedback from the board on this topic?
If you have webinars that are available in your resources in your libraries, so folks can always tap into them. They're hard to develop, I get it, because we're doing that right now because we have the same issues. We have no staff, it's tough to get the information out, but we are working on doing briefings and webinars so that, just like you Google something, you YouTube it, how do I fix my refrigerator? Well, what do I do? So maybe having someone from each department speaking as to the process, or just something they click on and they see a body, or whomever it is, that could be helpful. And that way it's continuous, it's ongoing, you update it when you need to, when you want to.
And link to the Florida Housing Coalition webinars that put on webinars like every month, it seems like.
We do.
Right? They're fantastic.
They are.
And timely, and, are they proprietary, or can we link
No,
those?
they want that stuff disseminated.
Yeah.
Just as simple as that. And then really put a spotlight on it for our residents and developers, like, go here and learn more.
Well, I like the ideas, and I've got confidence in our staff, and I've seen the great work that particularly Mr. Lane has done in this area, and I would prefer to leave it as it is and give them the flexibility to carry it out.
Yeah, I know I told the board before, and we're staffed, to manage the funds. And typically, before pre-COVID, $4 or $5 million, and now we're, it was really the money that we had to move, and that's housing, community development. We're about 3 times that now, and we, we've increased our staff by 1. So, when we get into, what we're talking about here is policy. It's not managing the funds. This is outside of my team's work, So when it comes to policy, it's me and Denise and Gina, and it's a heavy load, So, to Mr. Rector's point, we do what we can. We certainly do, and all of these things are great ideas. We wish we could tackle them all. Mr. Scalia's talked oftentimes about a symposium. I ran that by, my colleagues in the county and other jurisdictions. Great idea. I'd love to put it together. Habitat for Humanity could be part of that. There's a lot of good things that could come out of that. It's on the radar, I can tell you.
Is there anything that the Public Communications Department can help with, especially on that last bullet points, since we're talking about really forms of communication and technology and all that?
Yeah, I think they would definitely be helpful in that area.
Okay.
And then again, I think maybe this relates or ties in with that communications and marketing policy series at the back as well, so. All right, so I'm hearing continue, tie in with others, okay. All right, recommendation 1.4, publish a brochure or other information handout in a prominent location on the city's affordable housing webpage that explains the city's development approval and permitting process to developers, including but not limited to, and then we have relationship between city and county policies and city-sponsored incentives for affordable housing. Although this is implemented, it's in progress, requires updates to Housing Division, planning and development webpage as an ongoing review committee updates. So any suggestion whether to continue, modify, or remove this? It is ongoing and in process.
I think we may just want to add update, because publishing a brochure is great, but maybe publish a brochure and update and basically continuously update it, because as things change, we're going to want to make sure that things are being updated. So however that can be worded.
Okay.
Could we just put in annual review of the existing brochure?
Mm-hmm. I think that would be fine.
Yeah. Okay.
So Pierre, I remember you had brought up this topic, I think, at last year's meeting about a brochure, a central location for information for developers and builders. Have you been to the website lately, or?
No, I have not.
Okay. Are you not building anything right now? Affordable?
No.
Not affordable? Okay. All right.
We did make some improvements to the website, and I thought they came out great.
Mhm.
And now we're going to a new platform.
Oh, jeez.
But, the way we configured it, the tabs were resources for developers, resources for residents.
Yes.
So you just, whoever you were, you just clicked on what you were looking for. I thought it came out really well, really good.
That was the conversation we had last year, to basically say, depending on who is visiting the website, they need to know exactly where to go for the information they're looking for. So just modify and then add some sort of annual review mention in there.
I was just looking at how to edit it, and I'm going to have to think a little bit about this, either incorporate it into the main sentence above or as another bullet below. But we'll bring back some edited language on the 7th that'll incorporate that into that, either as another bullet or into the main heading. All right, so that would be modify with the requirement to annually review and update. Mm-hmm. All right, so number 1.5, this is what we had just talked about when we were discussing 1.1. Encourage affordable housing developers of single-family homes to submit frequently used template plans for pre-screening. This is implemented, it's ongoing and regularly encouraged, but there hasn't been a lot of response in terms of receiving those plans. So,
I had a question about this. Are those proprietary? I mean, if we have affordable housing that's been built, can we ask that developer, like, can you donate your plans to our website so that or is there's obviously a value to those plans, you've paid for them.
Yeah. It might be an idea, but then he's paid a lot of money for those plans. But are they not public record, the plans? And then someone could bore off them and get an engineer to modify them or update them.
They are public record, but I believe they are owned by the architect who designs them, so that would be unethical to copy them. One thing that some communities have done, in particular out in California, more with accessory dwelling units, is to create some drawings, and then they can provide those to people who want to use them. So that's another way that you might be able to get at what you're trying to accomplish.
So I guess to answer your question, it would have to be a separate recommendation than this, I think, because this would be something different than maybe having an extra recommendation that say, provide interested developers with
approved
drawings
templates or something
Yes,
like
yes.
that? I mean, would you, Pierre, out of the generosity of your heart, donate a plan you already paid for affordable house? Would developers do that, or is it just too much of a?
I have no problem, but the plan belongs to the architect. It's his seal, and it's his.
Okay. So it would have to be a donation from an architect?
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's a big ask? I have no concept of the value of that. It's a big ask.
It's a risk.
Why is it a risk?
Because once the engineer or the architect on record signs the documents, they're stating that it's up to code and everything, so for anybody to use the same, it's, somebody will need to sign again, and that somebody will have to review the plans to make sure that they're up to code, and the engineering, it's at ease with what was designed, so, yeah. Now, what I'm still confused is I guess we can submit to Gina those templates, right? To your department.
Right.
And we put any developer will put a name to it, a prototype, and you guys will review it, and then once the permits are submitted for any other regular application, then we'll refer to that prototype, correct?
Correct. We would review it against what had already been reviewed and approved by staff, make sure it's exactly the same, and then issue the permit.
Okay.
And I don't know that anybody has an answer to that question, but how much of an investment would it be for the city of Clearwater to provide, let's say, 3 different drawings for affordable housing, either single family, it would have to be single family homes, but single family affordable homes? Is that something that?
That's a good question, and, it comes down to, Ms. Camacho said risk. Now are we accountable for, for that design?
Right.
So I don't know the answer to that. There's some legal issues there. Maybe we could offer something as a suggestion, but certainly not be on record as being the designer of it. I don't know, Gina, you got some
There's some groups out there that do sell their plans. Liberty Housing, I think is what they're called, and they have a lot of homes that, whether they're affordable or not, I don't know, but they have varying sizes that could do that. So there are organizations that do make their plans available. Whether they meet Florida Building Code, I don't know, but that would be something we could do some research and find other places that do that.
If there's communities, across the country that are able to do that, it might be an incentive if we can say, we're the only city in Pinellas County that offer that.
3 pre-approved kind of plans.
Especially if the investment is not, as much as we think it is, that might be worth looking into it.
Some of the plans that I've seen online are in maybe the $1,500 to $2,000, $3,000, depending on, of course, the size of the home.
Okay.
So, I think it's a great idea to be able to make plans available, but again, we'd have to have Florida architect design them, and we would have to make sure that if the building code changes, that they're updated and,
Yeah.
and all of that. But I do think that would be a great move to provide plans to folks.
Well, and we have an ARPA bucket for affordable housing of $5 million, or no, it's, what, 2.3 or something like that, because we have, I'm getting the North Greenwood CRA, but anyway, we have millions for affordable housing, we could pull that out for those plans. It's, I mean, you know, it's a possibility.
So we put together a series of recommendations for that. It's 3.3 million. That'll be coming to council soon, but that's not on there.
It's not on there?
No, I hadn't thought of it. I mean, it could be a suggestion at the time.
But
How
then
do we
there
put
isn't
it on
an
there?
ongoing, sorry.
How do we put that on there? Do we still have time to make a modification?
The way
to that?
we've written the recommendations is, we're going to use the money to do this, 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 and this. We
Right.
didn't assign, how much for each of them, because we
Right.
don't know. We would pigeonhole ourselves into, okay, we don't have any more money for DPAs, so we get we're going to keep all those programs open until the money's gone. So if we added something to it, it wouldn't be difficult to do.
Okay.
You know.
And who, would it be the NAHAB that would add something to that, or the city council, or how would that even?
It would be the council. It's something we could, I can talk with Ms. Sanderson about it.
Okay.
I'm not sure if the agenda item has been written. I think it's going to November 3rd. But we can, that's something I think we can be fairly flexible with.
Okay.
So it sounds like this would be a new recommendation that we're talking about here. We're
Yeah, it wouldn't
changing
be.
this one, we're going to
I don't
add
think
one.
we're changing this one. I think we would continue this one and possibly add a recommendation. We may not even have to add a recommendation if it's already something that we're putting in the recommendations for the ARPA funds.
Yeah, allow me and Ms. Sanderson to take a good look at that.
Okay.
Because you all are the advisory committee, so you would advise the council, woo-hoo, of, spend some money and get some pre-approved plans for
Yeah.
these things or
Yeah.
something. If that's what you want to do after this meeting.
Those could be ADU plans as well, Gina.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I know Dunedin's looking into that. Yeah.
So for this recommendation, we would continue.
Continue for
Yes.
1.5, okay. All right, so 2.1, next one, coordinate with Pinellas County as feasible regarding database rate flexibility within the multimodal impact fee to support the provision of affordable housing. It's already implemented, coordination's ongoing, and the impact fee already provides a discount for affordable housing. Continue, modify, or remove.
Gabby, do you have feedback on this one? Because I know it says impact fee already provides a discount for affordable housing. Is that a discount that actually makes a difference for a affordable housing developer, or is that a discount that it's a discount on paper but really doesn't make that big of a difference?
Well, any discount makes a difference, so, so I would say continue.
Okay.
They provided this, there is a discount for affordable housing in this.
Can we remove the phrase "as feasible"? Because we are just going to coordinate with Pinellas County regarding database. I mean, we already do it.
Yep.
Right.
So the direction is to remove the phrase "as feasible." It'll say, coordinate with Pinellas County regarding database rate flexibility within the multimodal impact fee. So we'll modify. All right, so that's 2.1. 2.2, continue to assess the financial, legal, and administrative feasibility of reducing, refunding, or redefining by unit size the cost of impact fees and/or permitting fees. This is already implemented. Assessment is ongoing. We had a few notes here. The Parks and Rec impact fees are to be revised in early 2023 with a proposed waiver for affordable housing. And I believe this is ongoing consideration regarding multiple fees. So, all right, continue, modify, or remove. Yeah.
So I had and this is sort of a big step, but think about it. What if we added at the end of this one, we added with the goal to remain on par or below Pinellas County municipalities' cost of impact fees and/or permitting fees for affordable housing. I want us to be competitive. It'd be great if we were leaders, but at least let's be on par with other municipalities in the county. I mean, I don't know where we stand with all of our impact fees with the other municipalities, but What if we added remain on, with the goal to remain on par or below Pinellas County municipalities' cost of impact fees and/or permitting fees for affordable housing?
Having the phrase with the goal is going to be good because it's inclusive of just us just trying to.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that's good. Does the rest?
How, is it realistic? Do you know where we stand, Chuck, on those things?
Well, not entirely, because impact fees are kind of all over the place. But, I mean, the change with our Parks and Rec fee, if approved by council, that's a great start.
Yeah.
You know, it goes to zero. And their impact fees are increasing with their change. I mean, they had proposed a 50% reduction, and it still would have gone up, affordable housing. So the waiver is really good.
All right, so the direction for 2.2 is to modify, and to modify to add a phrase at the end that says, with the goal of being on par with other Pinellas County municipalities in terms of impact.
Can I make one other statement too, just in anticipation? So if we do this with the goal of, remaining on par and all that business, there may be some questions from the council about, well, if you're reducing impact fees or you're lowering them, that means we have less money in the general coffers or whatever. I think it'd be good when this recommendation comes to council in December, that we have an answer about how many units we're really talking about and what a budget impact might look like, because it's really not that much, I'm thinking, in the whole scheme of things. When you say something like, we're going to reduce or eliminate these or make them the lowest in the county, I think some people will panic and be like, oh my gosh. But let's put it in context, whatever it is, and I don't know what it is, but I think context is important. That's all.
So modify.
If I'm not mistaken, and Gina, you're probably the better one to answer this, if most impact fees have to remain whole, so you still have to pay for them. Somebody has to pay for them.
The city would pay for that.
Correct.
So it's an incentive.
Right, so unless you've identified the funding source.
So this would be, I guess if we enacted something like that, based on what municipalities are charging now, surrounding municipalities, which again is going to be staff time to look that up and figure out what a differential might be, then you're saying that we'd also have to decide where that money is going to come from. Is the city going to pony up the $40,000 a year to absorb these impact fees, to cover these impact fees?
Right, and Chuck, I don't know the answer to this. Could we utilize our federal or state funds as project costs or as cost of development to pay for?
Well, we can. We do have a finite funding source that came through an apartment sale a while ago that we're going to begin to use to pay down impact fees, but it'll go away at some point. But really what we do is we make sure the developer walks away with a modest profit. So if we do a loan and it's all inclusive of their total development costs. So if we do a loan and they don't make 12% on their 12% of total development costs as a profit, I don't maybe not use the word profit, but a return on their investment, because a lot of these are nonprofits, we'll reduce the loan. We'll forgive an amount of that loan enough so they can walk away with that 12%. So it incentivizes them, but it's really more of a safety net. 12% is not a huge developer fee. It's a safety net, so they know that if they build in Clearwater, that, they're not going to lose money. So that's kind of what we do. So right there, it kind of helps. Impact fees are rolled into that. So
Okay, that's good.
it's not a direct pay, but it's surety for the developer. Developers like surety, right, Pierre?
Yep.
Well, and I think you're right. I mean, I don't want any affordable housing developer to be, riding away with 50% profit, and.
They do. I mean, we look at and it doesn't happen, But, we're not going to, we look at the numbers and we make sure I've told developers often, and Habitat's not one, they know their game, but they come in with these elaborate designs with roof lines, and, I tell them, you're not building their dream home, you're building them the home they need to live in. And we really look at the numbers and we make sure, we know what the construction cost should be and where they should be. And if they come in at, hard costs at $100, $180 a foot, that's too high right now. I mean, it used to be 100, now it's 150. So we look at that and we make sure the costs are reasonable, so. And if they're not, we don't fund it.
All right, so 2.2 with modification regarding the phrase about on par with other smallest county municipalities. All right, 2.3 is the Planning and Development Department will recommend amending the fee schedule of fee rates and charges ordinance to provide for a reduction in the plan review and permit fees for single-family homes. This is implemented. Planning and Development completed changes to the ordinance to reduce fees by 75% for affordable housing. So this is already implemented. Continue, modify, or remove?
Continue.
Continue, okay. All right.
Do you want to add that on par with again? I mean, just so that we're competitive with the Planning and Development Department or not?
I believe this just occurred, correct?
Yeah, we just passed that, and frankly, I think ours is the biggest reduction out
Woo-hoo.
here. So
Fantastic.
That's why we chose 75%.
That's
Good.
awesome.
Okay.
Well, maybe the recommendation changes because you're not recommending that they amend them. We
So,
continue to monitor.
Continue, yeah.
Okay. And celebrate, right?
All right, so we're going to change this one to modify and add some continue language just to make sure that it stays in place.
If I could just say one thing related to fees. Everybody calculates fees differently, so it's really hard to say our fee is exactly on par with somebody else's just because like ours is based on values, other construction values, some are based on floor area. So it's really hard to get apples to apples. And the same thing with impact fees. Like the cost of building out our water sewer system is going to be different than Largo's and all. So I understand we want to be competitive, but sometimes I don't know if we're going to get that exact understanding that we're exactly in line with each other.
Not apples to apples, right?
Yeah, right.
All right, so 2.3, modifying and adding that continuing language that to represent that it's already implemented, but we want to keep it ongoing. 2.4, the Economic Development and Housing Department will develop a policy to assist with the payment of plan review and permit fees and impact fees, utilizing state and federal funds designed for affordable housing. Again, this is already implemented. Do we want to continue, modify, or remove this recommendation?
So instead of will develop, we may want to also change this language to have more, we'll continue to monitor, or we'll, something that more along that line.
We'll continue to assist with
Mhm.
payment.
Okay. All right, so 2.4 continued with continuing language. All right. Flexible densities. So this is where we get into density incentives and flexibilities. Recommendation 3.1, continue to provide an allowance of density flexibility for affordable housing developments. This is already in the comprehensive plan. Planning and Development added clarifying language regarding the density bonus. So this is already done. Are we continuing, modifying, or removing 3.1?
I'm going to continue it, right? Yeah.
Continue?
So the language that Planning and Development put in was very helpful. With a smaller development, what you have is when you got into your densities and you did your rounding, it really wouldn't help a project of lower than 5 units, and now it does. The clarification and the way that it's calculated, they did a great job with that amendment. Yeah, thanks, Gina.
So 3.2, maintain specific parameters to grant density flexibility for affordable housing projects as allowed in the Community Development Code within the different zoning districts. Again, already implemented by comprehensive policy and by the Community Development Code.
So we'll continue that.
Continue? Okay. All right,
Just one little comment. When we have this language here by comprehensive plan policies, comma, under 3.1 and 3.2, I was wondering if we could put a year date there, only because some of the commentary later on is, we're going to wait until we have a comprehensive plan review. And it's like, I don't want to wait. And so when were these policies, what year was it, so that we have some context of how frequently things can change or not, that's all.
Okay, so would that be citing the date of the policy in the actual recommendation? So maybe a parenthetical after?
Yeah, like 2012 or 2018 or whatever.
I don't think the part in red will be in the final report, though. You're talking about the part that's in red?
Yeah, that's what I was asking, is this,
I think
I don't
it's
think
just
that's
for
not gonna be in
me
there,
to know.
yeah.
Yeah, I
is
mean,
this to be incorporated in the actual recommendation, or is this just?
no, yeah,
Yeah.
I think just to understand, because I need some context of how frequently things can be modified and changed or not.
So in the actual LHIS report, there's a narrative about how the recommendation was considered and how it is either being continued or changed. So we can definitely add that,
Okay.
that background to it in terms of.
And I can find it there too, that year that it was implemented?
I don't believe it's in there now, but when we prepare the actual
Okay.
document, we'll
Great.
do that. Mhm. All right, 3.3, continue to define the density allowance for an affordable housing project as part of a pre-application meeting. This again is already implemented by the Community Development Code, the Planning and Development Department, and the Review Committee.
So we'll continue that.
Continue, okay. All right, moving on to infrastructure capacity. Previously, and I believe in every year that the AHAC has met since the beginning of the AHAC, the infrastructure capacity recommendation has always been not to recommend this particular incentive. Reasoning being is that the reservation of infrastructure capacity for housing for very low-income persons, and moderate-income persons, really, I believe that it's always been considered that this isn't necessarily an incentive that we want to support because we need infrastructure and it needs to be funded. So, any comments about that? Mm-hmm.
I don't understand this one as much. I mean, when I read it, what I see is the capacity for housing for very low income, and moderate. I mean, that's where we have the most need.
Well, the infrastructure is there. It's built out. I think this would apply to a more suburban or rural community. We have the road network, we have the utility network in place, and developments can just tie into it.
Okay, so
we
it
don't
just
need
doesn't
to,
apply.
we don't need to improve the infrastructure.
It's already there.
It's already there.
Okay.
Right, I think in the context of City of Clearwater and Pinellas County generally, because everything's already built out and you're not having to construct new utilities to get to that housing development, mostly everything that's happening is infill to some degree. I believe that's why it's always
Okay.
been left out of the incentive menu.
Okay.
So we'll continue that.
Okay. All right, the next one. So this is where we get into some of the incentives and barriers that we talked about last time. So number 5, accessory dwelling units. I know we didn't talk so much about accessory dwelling units, but we did introduce the concept of co-housing and some alternative housing types. The barrier that was discussed on September 13th was accessory dwelling units are not necessarily promoted. There's no flexibility currently for other alternative housing types. The strategy, as discussed with city staff, will consider alternative housing type policies during the next comp plan update, and then also consider regional examples or best practices regarding alternative housing type policies and regulations. So looking to the actual recommendations in the LHIS report, recommendation 5.1, as it exists currently, is to continue to allow for accessory dwelling units in non-residential zoning districts as described within the city's Community Development Code. This is already implemented. But with that, city staff will consider adding more flexibility during the next comp plan update. So essentially that recommendation would be implemented, it'll just be implemented over time, so. Yes?
What's the comp plan update? Because this referred, throughout the rest of these slides. So what are we talking about as far as time frame? Thanks.
Well, as you may know, we have been working more on the North Greenwood CRA plan, which has been our priority. We are going to be going to City Council, CDB, and the EAB with our preliminary framework and vision statement at our next Council and CDB and EAB meeting, just to make sure that people buy into the vision that came out of our public process that we had. And to also understand how we're trying to change the plan and how the chapters will be organized, because they will be different. Affordable housing will be included in the land use quality of places, I think is the name of the chapter. So we'll be talking with council. Our goal, depending on how much public input we add sort of toward the end of the process, we're looking at maybe going to council in May, April or May, probably May now, because I think we've talked about adding some additional public input. But that's really where we are. But it takes 6 months to get a comp plan amendment through the state, because we have to submit it after city council. CDB has to review it, city council has to review it, it has to go to the state, and then when it comes back from the state, we can pass it on second reading and then submit it up. So at least we'll have a good indication after first reading, probably where we're going to be. But we did make some comp plan changes after the last meeting you all had last year, so we did make some changes to try to broaden some of the language that we had. I think the big policy issue for city council will be accessory dwelling units and probably co-housing. Those would be the two areas. I do think based on what we're learning from other communities, ADUs sound great, but they're very expensive, and I'm not sure they're really providing a lot of the affordable housing that people think they would be, because in other areas, they found that the owners use them for their own families, or they like to rent them out for Airbnbs. So I don't think it's, I think we should have it in our toolbox, but I'm not so sure it's going to be something that's really going to move the needle for us. And I think Pierre has some experience with some accessory dwelling units, and people see them as great rental properties as well, and that are not necessarily affordable. So, but definitely should be able to be talking about some changes in the spring, late spring, early summer.
Okay. Changes, so talking about it in late spring or early summer, but then after it goes to wherever it needs to go, we're talking about like this time of year next year for it to be.
For the comp plan, we'll also, we'll need to know what council is going to be supportive of, what kind of code changes, because we'll need to implement the changes. But, we do have flexibility. I know there was some discussion later on about tiny homes. We don't restrict tiny homes. You can build tiny homes. You just need to look at the zoning, and we would allow multiple tiny homes on a property through a process. So I don't think you should consider those not to be allowed under today's code too. I know that was going to be a point of discussion probably later, but.
Go ahead.
So I would say, as the elected official up here, I would ask that you all, me too, get really informed about tiny homes, ADUs, and co-housing, or whatever else Gina thinks are going to be hot topics on the comp plan revisions, so that you can advise us and speak on it, because you all care the most about that. You're the experts. So I need you to show up and speak up and give input when it comes time to discuss the comp plan during the council meeting. I would appreciate that.
Actually, we have a tiny home development in for permitting right now, but I think they're running into issues with stormwater. So, there's always some sort of issue of making these new types of development work, and how we're going to manage stormwater. And I think that's something that others are encountering. Building in older neighborhoods that have been changed, and stormwater is always a big issue.
Well, and I would think too, that Florida Housing Coalition is an amazing resource, and maybe they have webinars on their site about tiny homes, ADUs, co-housing, that we could, I'm going to go there and check things out, just to learn more.
Gina, I just have a question for you. This here says that we're already allowing accessory dwelling units in non-residential zoning districts. How many people in the city of Clearwater live in non-residential zoning districts? I would not think that if somebody owns a house on a property, they would be in a residential. So
the code allows them in conjunction with things like industrial uses, where you may have a caretaker on site So we allow it in those districts, so
Okay.
we can accommodate. So it's possible for someone to build that, whether they work, the business or not, but that's sort of how that is couched.
Okay. Is there any consideration in the comp plan update to change that to residential zoning districts as well?
Yeah, I think that's what we're talking
Okay,
about.
okay.
We tried that
Okay.
back in probably 2008, and there just wasn't support to allow it in the
Okay.
residential districts at that time. That's how we ended up, that you can have 2 units on a property if the density supports it.
Okay.
So ADU would be a unit that's not necessarily supported by density, and that's what we're trying to, I think, move forward
Okay.
in this next comp plan update.
Okay. Appreciate the clarification.
Sure.
So I think regarding the residential zoning districts, I think that really falls under 5.2, which is the next one. But before we get there, I just want to confirm regarding 5.1, the direction regarding this. We can either continue as it is or add a statement about the consideration of flexibility. I'm not sure how much flexibility in conjunction with the non-residential zoning district you want to recommend those. So if I could get some feedback about this 5.1, which is really unique just to the non-residential zoning district.
Because of that, I think we can continue 5.1 and have more conversation at 5.2 because this is really just, 5.1 is really just for non-residential districts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so 5.2, this is where it comes to consider the actual residential zoning districts. So this has been a policy, or a recommendation, I should say, that has been carried over, I think, through a few AHACs now. It's revisit with City Council Comprehensive Plan Policy C.1.1.2 and Policy C.1.1.8 to consider allowing one accessory dwelling unit on a residential lot of any size, provided that certain criteria are met. And then it specifies specific criteria, which are really related to maybe compatibility with the neighborhood and then occupancy and tenure requirements to ensure that it really truly is used as affordable housing. This has not been implemented. Again, my understanding is that city staff will consider all this as something under the next comprehensive plan update next year, as something to really explore and get into these policies.
And I think this is what, Kathleen, you're mentioning, to say if the comp plan update is going to be happening in spring of 2023 and then the approval in late 2023, this is something that we need to definitely be present for and push for if that's something that we want to see happen. So I think we can continue this recommendation and just make a note in our calendars to be there to push that.
Because I would say, because I look at the word to consider allowing one accessory dwelling unit, and I was thinking about changing to recommend allowing, but we're not informed enough to know yet. So
Right.
y'all need to decide, independently, right?
Correct.
And then as a NAHAB, you can work as a,
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll continue 5.1 and 5.2 as is, understanding that they will be reviewed next year during the comprehensive plan update. 5.3, we went ahead and made some edits to this recommendation for your consideration just based on the last discussion we had. This one, it was fairly easy to just incorporate that language directly. 5.3, we're suggesting expand the definition of accessory dwelling unit to include tiny homes and provide flexibility for other alternative unit types such as co-housing to incentivize unconventional solutions to address affordable housing needs within existing neighborhoods.
That's great.
Yes.
is that okay with Gina? Because to me, it just sort of clicked today that tiny homes are way different than ADUs. Tiny homes can stand on their own. As you said, there's a community of tiny homes kind of in the works. So is it okay to link those? Because it seems like not. An ADU has to be associated with a larger structure, right?
Correct. I mean, technically, you could have a tiny home that's an ADU.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's probably good to just remove that. You basically are just talking about a smaller dwelling unit than what's the primary unit on the property.
So maybe we change the verbiage to say expand the definition of accessory dwelling unit to provide flexibility for other alternatives. Like we don't have to say to include tiny homes.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think now that that's brought up, I think there is some other editing that needs to occur to this. I think the other thing is, so one thing is we are expanding the definition of accessory dwelling unit to include tiny homes, which will take tiny homes out. I think at the time, because this was a carryover of a previous recommendation, we were trying to provide for alternative on-site accessory dwelling units. So for example, if you wanted to put a tiny home in your backyard or something like that to create that additional unit. But now that we're adding the reference to co-housing in here, we don't want the definition of accessory dwelling unit to include co-housing, because that's really a separate thing. It's not an accessory dwelling unit. So I think maybe we need to reconsider the structure of this entire recommendation. Maybe take out the reference to accessory dwelling unit, or just provide flexibility for other alternative unit types such as co-housing to incentivize unconventional solutions to address affordable housing needs within existing neighborhoods, and just take out the first few words. So my suggestion would be start it with the word provide. So provide flexibility for other alternative unit types such as co-housing, because we've already addressed accessory dwelling units in the other previous recommendations in this section. So, okay. I talked through that. Good, you. Thank you for putting up with my rambling there. All right.
I'm excited about this one. I'm thinking, rooming houses, or like on college campuses, Greek houses and things like that. But what might be ways to incentivize that? I mean, what kind of benefits would the homeowner get to lease out a room and a bathroom, or have group housing? I mean,
You just hit it. You're leasing it out to renovation.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, would the city have any levers to incentivize?
We could potentially fund a program,
Yeah.
assist the build, and then we'd have to.
And maybe a match, partner with a nonprofit to help match a person, like the home share that's already in the county.
Yeah, I mean, we would definitely have to partner with a nonprofit, because the monitoring of that would be a lot. But yeah, I would love to, it would be great to stand up a program supporting tiny homes, because we can fund it if it has to remain affordable, it has to meet the definition.
Yeah.
But it's something we certainly have on the radar.
Yeah.
But co-housing.
Co-housing is interesting.
It is. Gina, would you imagine that a co-housing structure would then be considered commercial? So other Florida building code requirements, like would it have to be sprinkles? Would it have, some of those other things that might be triggered by the creation of co-housing?
I mean, to me, I don't know. I don't want to speak on a building code issue. I'm not certain about that. But, I mean, multifamily is considered commercial. This could very well be considered commercial for the purposes of the building code. Yeah, I think we do have some situations in the community where we have people that have a lot of people living here and renting out rooms that have been very, very problematic for neighborhoods. So I think we really need to approach this thoughtfully about where they could go. Like, I would not suggest that we open up single-family neighborhoods maybe for this, just because of some of the issues that we had. They may be more appropriate for our multifamily districts.
I think to Chuck's point, it would have to be done under a program, so that it wouldn't be all of a sudden you can turn your house and say every single room of my house can be rented by somebody. It would be more like, hey, my kids just left for college, I have 2 empty rooms. There might be people that are looking to rent, that right now really people can only do through Airbnb or those short-term rentals that are not really helping the affordable housing, situation in a city. So we can't put too much detail in our recommendation, but that's definitely, I think, the way that we're pushing it to go.
I seem to remember a couple of years ago, the Pinellas HFA had an issue that was just brought up about there was something that was being done with co-housing, and the whole issue was it ultimately was nixed because there were no sprinklers. So yes, that was something that came up, and I don't remember the exact project and what they were doing, but it was within the past, I want to say 3 or 4 years that it was discussed.
And again, we can't put too much detail in that recommendation because it's going to depend on what that comp plan update is going to look like.
And I think it's really important that we continue to kind of keep the language of this one broadly, because the one thing that one of the things I've learned from the Florida Housing Coalition seminars, which Chuck shared, which is really good, and then the forum the other night, was the importance of creativity, because there are all these barriers to affordable housing, and it's really important that we have some broad recommendation that includes all kinds of ideas that we may not even know of today.
Or think of, yeah.
And we're able to consider best practices from other communities to create what, was called the other night. And I hear more and more called affordable housing crisis. So I think broadening it, not getting too specific, as you've just said, is important here.
I think with the modifications that you made, we're good to approve that recommendation or
Okay.
Hey,
move on.
Camille,
Yes.
Terry had her hand up. Terry
I'm sorry.
Malcolm-Smith.
Come on up, Terry.
You have to come up.
I think we have a co-sharing model with Team and Village,
Yes, we do.
where we have a rental situation where it's being monitored, where you have like a duplex or a single family home with multiple bedroom, and then they share the main areas. And that would be something that we could promote and use the agency it's being monitored, that facilitate that environment.
Yeah, we partnered
provide.
with the county to buy those units a number of years ago. And Going Home Coalition, which Pete is a big part of, it's non-traditional families, people that don't even know each other, and there's challenges that come with that, there really are. So I think it's worked out in some ways, in other ways it hasn't. It's been difficult. The one I think of is HEP, their veterans housing. That's kind of the vision I have in my head about how it might work. Several bedrooms and a shared kitchen, that kind of thing.
And Gabe and I did a monitoring just a couple of weeks ago, and my advice would be if someone is going into this kind of environment, they have to be hands-on. They have to be someone there at all times or frequently to monitor the situation. Because again, with people coming from different backgrounds, you're going to have confrontation and all of that. So you have to have an active person there overseeing and facilitating what's going on. Pretty much, I wouldn't say on a day-to-day basis, but probably, on a month-to-month basis.
Thank you, Terry. All right, so I think we're good with 5.3 with the modifications we made.
Okay. All right, moving on to 6.1 and 6.2. These are parking reduction recommendations. Continue to allow flexible setback requirements for affordable housing developments.
We can continue that.
Continue? Okay. Continue to tie reductions of off-street parking requirements to proximity and access to alternative modes of transportation, including transit, sidewalks, trails, or other options.
And we can continue that one too.
Okay. All right, flexible lot configuration, 7.1. This is to continue to allow flexible lot configurations for affordable housing developments while remaining sensitive to the character and context of existing neighborhoods.
We can continue that as well.
All right, modification of street requirements. This is one that we, again, have not continued annually. Because such standards are in place to benefit public health and safety, we do not recommend that the city utilize the modification of street requirements.
I think we can continue that. So that's the same conversation we had for
The infrastructure.
item, for number 4,
For the infrastructure, yeah. Okay, 9, pre-adoption policy consideration. 9.1, as part of its annual reporting, the Economic Development and Housing Department should continue to review all regulations and ordinances that may affect the cost of housing. This is an annual review.
Do we want to change the should to will here again? Yeah.
All right, so we are striking should and changing it to will. All right. 9.2, continue the review process maintained by the senior executive team through which any new regulatory instrument created by the city, ordinances, regulations, etc., can be evaluated for its effect on housing affordability.
Continue.
Okay. All right. 10, inventory of public lands. So this goes back to one of the barriers that we identified in the first meeting, size of city-owned properties. Properties on the city-owned inventory list are too small. Larger parcels are needed to support affordable housing. I think some of the strategies that were recommended at the last meeting were coordinate with Pinellas County's inventory list regarding properties near or within the city limits, and then the city recently increased the minimum lot size for donated properties. And just to confirm with city staff that happened. Okay, all right. So the next recommendation, 10.1, related to that would be the Economic Development and Housing Department should continue to maintain the inventory of publicly owned land. So this is just maintaining the inventory, regularly updating it.
I think same thing here, we'll do will instead of should, and then we can.
Okay. Can I make a comment about the publicly owned land? Just because we have so many weird little pockets of unincorporated Clearwater, can we include those unincorporated lands within the greater Clearwater area? Because if I'm a developer, and I'm not, but if I'm Pierre and I'm looking like, I think I want to build in Clearwater, you know, you don't want just the Clearwater short list. I would think I'd want to know, you know, what's down MLK on the north side that might not be part of, you know, or at this dividing line, now we're in unincorporated. Would that be helpful to have unincorporated too?
But we wouldn't be able to have incentives for this.
That's fine, and maybe
Okay.
we have an asterisk that, you know,
Okay.
city incentives don't apply here, but if I'm a builder and I don't know all the lines of unincorporated versus incorporated, at least I've got a accurate picture of, because, you know, you drive by so many vacant lots and you're like, what's this one? You know, and I'm writing it down.
I think the recommendation to provide a link to the county's inventory.
Sure, okay.
I think that takes care of
Yeah,
that.
yep. But with some sentence that says, many properties within unincorporated Clearwater are found here, or something that says,
If they are.
If they are,
We don't know how much
yeah.
the county owns, yeah.
yeah, or some, or whatever, or any properties in unincorporated are found here.
So should we add to this recommendations verbiage to say, and will link to Pinellas County available land as well, or something along those lines? Would that be?
Unincorporated Pinellas County or something?
I'm going to, with that idea, I'm going to recommend adding that to 10.2 rather than 10.1,
Okay.
just because it's talking about publishing the public land inventory, and maybe we put on there as well as
Right, yeah.
publishing a link to Pinellas County's.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
With a great big asterisk that the incentives don't apply there, right? It's like,
Well,
but,
they're.
Well, they have theirs.
well, that's right, they have their own, yeah.
All right. So 10.2 will modify to add a reference to the Pinellas County's list as well in terms of publishing that or making a link available. All right, 10.3, this is about making that publicly owned land on the list available to prospective developers and nonprofit agencies.
We'll continue that one.
10.4, this is regarding coordination with the Planning and Development Department to identify properties having repeat code violations. This has been implemented, coordination is ongoing, and the program's in place. I don't know how much this has been used, though. Has it?
Well, we've had a code foreclosure program that's been pretty successful in acquiring properties, or we've acquired some of them through that program. You know, we have so much in liens built up and fines that we foreclose on those liens. So we've done that. That's been effective. I believe the code division, I believe they went through an exercise and looked through all of the properties that were liened and reached out. Wasn't that? And there was some success there in getting those properties into compliance. The foreclosure program is kind of good because it has the ability to provide us lands that we can control and turn around for affordable housing. So yeah, we're active in this realm.
I would just change that should, maybe. Economic Development Housing Department will coordinate with, you know, ongoing coordination.
All right. 10.4 will be modified to change the should to a will. All right, moving on to 10.5, develop a new policy procedure for distribution of city-owned lots. Consider including energy-efficient items into the scoring matrix. This has been implemented and a lot distribution procedure was created.
Yes, so with the new lot disposition procedure, we may want to change the verbiage of this to just say continue to monitor the program. Because there are items of energy efficiency included in that scoring matrix.
Yep.
We
yep.
reviewed that with the NAM,
Solar,
yeah.
EV capable, there's other things too, so yes.
Energy Star appliances.
Yep.
So should we take out consider and just have that owned lots period, and then include, energy efficient items into the scoring?
Actually, we're going to change it because the policy's already been developed and implemented.
Oh, so
So
we're
we have to
done.
change the verbiage of that to say,
Oh,
to
'cause we already
probably
did.
say,
Completed?
continue to monitor
Okay,
and update.
okay.
I will
Just
say
so we have it.
something, perhaps maintain policy procedure for distribution of city-owned lots, including energy efficient items
Okay.
for the scoring matrix, something
Great.
to that effect, so, okay. All right,
It
so-
would be nice for that recommendation, though, to also mention that as new items, come up,
Technology.
we may want to continue to update that policy to include those items and new incentives, whatever else we may have.
Okay. Okay, so we'll make some modifications to 10.5 to maintain the policy, including the energy efficient, and then also consider new technology as it arrives. Okay. 11, so let's see, 11.1. This is the proximity to transportation, employment, and mixed-use development. There's several future land use element policies to this effect in the city's comprehensive plan. We're just maintaining and implementing those, and I would assume this would be considered in the comp plan update process as maintained as well.
Are we able to change the should to will here, too?
We can.
You're the best.
Might as well,
I know.
Might as well make it consistent.
All right, so 12 is, okay, so now we're getting into the ACAC initiated recommendations. So 11 was the last statute required incentive that we had to evaluate. 12 gets into the AHAC initiated ones. So we have adaptive reuse. For this one, we had previously had a recommendation to continue to allow adaptive reuse involving the conversion of surplus and/or outmoded buildings, including old churches, school buildings, et cetera, where permitted by zoning district. Continue, modify, or remove.
I think we want to continue that.
Can I just ask a quick question? Are there a lot of limitations by the zoning district for that adaptive reuse? Because churches, schools, hospitals, all that stuff is all over the city. And so is it real limited on how we can adaptively reuse those?
I think the biggest limitation would be the zoning district in which it's in, whether residential is allowed, because right now, the way our zoning districts are structured in commercial districts, institutional, single-family home, residential is not allowed. But we do have a process that people can go through to avail themselves to it through the Comprehensive Infill Redevelopment Project. So it's possible, there's a process involved. I think your bigger issue, frankly, we've never seen any adaptive reuse projects just because I don't think we have a lot of, we don't have hospitals that aren't being used. We don't have train stations that aren't being used. Warehouses and factories, a lot of time they're best used for warehousing and factories instead of housing based on the environment. And, you see some old churches in other communities, but I don't think we have a lot of those either. Mm-hmm. So I just don't think it's...
Former schools.
Right,
Yeah, there are.
right. We have a
North
couple of
Ward
those,
and
yeah.
First Elementary.
Pardon me?
North Ward and
Right, those would be the, historic buildings would be really where you see adaptive use. And yes, as Chuck said, North Ward.
Well, and didn't we have a nursing home facility that was converted into apartments? So that would be an adaptive reuse.
that was an assisted living facility. It was really kind of, the way it was laid out, it was a pretty simple conversion. But yes, that was a successful, that project was made possible because of our density bonus. That was a really good project. We didn't have to put any money into it.
And then, isn't there the Senate bill that says that we can put affordable housing virtually anywhere? Does that preempt all this or not?
Yes, it does, but you would get through it through our comprehensive infill redevelopment project.
Okay,
So there's a way to implement the statutes
Okay.
through comp infill.
okay, thanks.
So we can continue this recommendation, correct?
All right, the Land Development Code. This is about encouraging developers to address recommended design standards for affordable housing developments consistent with Section 3-920.A.3.C.1 through 3 of the City of Clearwater Land Development Code, or Community Development Code, excuse me. Other criteria could include but are not limited to. These suggestions have been in here for a few AHAC convenings. So this is partially implemented. I believe the main sentence has been implemented. However, the other criteria below have not been directly implemented in the Community Development Code. So the question is continue, modify, or remove.
I think we'll want to continue that. There's not much more we can do than encouraging developers to address those design standards. We can't really force them to do
You
anything.
can incentivize.
True.
Incentivize developers to incorporate, to include design standards for affordable housing developments consistent with. So incentivize developers to include is a lot stronger. I have one little anecdote for the last bullet, use crime prevention through environmental design when practical and financially feasible. I mean, I want crime prevention kind of at the top of the list. I had a message from a Habitat for Humanity Clearwater resident who I went to her home dedication, and it was, I don't know, a few months ago. But anyway, wherever she lives, there's not adequate street lighting or lighting, and somebody keeps coming and stealing all of her garden things or decorations out front, and she's wondering, what we can do, and she had reached out, and I think she's got to pay or somehow do to get better street lighting. It's her responsibility, or it's not the city's, taking that up. And so, I don't know all those details. I referred it up to the city manager because, but anyway, we want people who are living in affordable housing to have safe, high-level design standards. So I don't know how you feel about incentivize developers to include.
If I could, this section already refers you to the affordable housing bonus. So this is already the place where you're getting density to build affordable housing.
Okay.
So I'm not really sure what would be the other incentives you would get. You could consider making some of things requirements, but I think I would caution you because we have such small parcels, it's not practical on every project to have a play area. Plus, if you're near a park, why would you want to incorporate that? You'd rather them get units than have a play area if you're within a certain distance from parks. So, I think that I would caution you about adding all of those things because we have such variety in the parcels that come forward. If it's in downtown, it's going to be a very, very urban form. You're going to be close to parks. I know we're evaluating a project right now in Lake Bellevue, and none of the designs have a play area because they don't have space for it. So I just caution you about adding more. I think the incentives, the requirements that we have in place deal with design and compatibility as well as energy efficiency of use, of the units and those kind of things. So, I guess if you want, we could look at adding more, but sometimes adding more makes it more expensive and...
Maybe we could put where appropriate, incentivize. I just think encourage is kind of a weak word. What does that even mean? It's like, come on, you can do it. But if we incentivize, there's some kind of a value there.
I think what Gina was getting at is because this is under the affordable housing density bonus section, this is it's required of the incentive. So basically to get the bonus, you have to do at least the main sentence there. And then I think in past AHAC meetings, I think the other criteria were aspirational ideas about what could be or should be required in an affordable housing development. So I think the question is, do we still want to require the main sentence as part of the affordable housing density bonus, which is already in the code? And then the other question is, should we continue recommending these other criteria when there's there are different criteria or similar criteria already in the community development code.
I don't think it necessarily hurts to keep those criteria since we're saying could include but are not limited to. But I don't know that it makes necessarily that big of a difference, so.
Yeah.
I like leaving it the way it is because I think the point was just made. What we don't want to do is to get so specific or to change, encourage, to incentivize, to inadvertently create a barrier to affordable housing. What we need to be doing is eliminating as many barriers as we possibly can right now for affordable housing. And although we need to be careful about being well-intended, but perhaps making the challenge more difficult than it already is, which is extremely difficult.
So does the board agree to just continue this recommendation as is? Okay.
All right, we'll move on to 14.1. So this is where we get into the communication marketing, and I believe we had some other recommendations earlier in today's meeting that pointed to this section. Continue to improve current communication channels and marketing materials to reach different stakeholders interested in affordable housing. Some of the suggestion actions include but are not limited to, and then we have a list of various actions to support marketing and communication. In terms of the status, most information is already on the webpage, and there's ongoing coordination with public communications to get the word out on some of these.
I think one of our recommendations earlier was to add something in the main part of this recommendation to also say, afterwards, as to reach different stakeholders interested in affordable housing. Here we could add, and to communicate successes within existing programs or something along that line, so that we could have some of what we discussed before implemented as well.
And I think with that third bullet, in order to promote the different housing programs that the city offers, including homebuyer education, down payment assistance, support, all that business, I think that speaks to, like last Thursday's packed house at North Greenwood, where we need to, I think it would be a big win if we had something like that biannually or something, to just keep a pulse on it and really be front-facing with our residents and, with the public in general throughout the county, that Clearwater understands that this is the most pressing problem. We are working on it. This is what we are doing. These are the steps, and these are our wins. This is our, scorecard, and we need your continued engagement and support. And I'll tell you, as we take this information and try to go to the state legislature and make changes, the more we have an educated public to help us write letters and make phone calls and go up to Tallahassee, it'll help. It can't hurt.
To your point, I think that NAHAB, either last year or this year, made a comment that we wanted to receive more information, more analytics when it came to those campaigns and how much was actually put out there, how much, and then how many people attended, and then how much information was included in, that kind of thing. And I think because our bullet points here are suggested actions that are include but not limited to, it wouldn't hurt to add a bullet point that says, share analytics with the appropriate committees about all those campaigns, because it would be really nice, quarterly or annually to receive that information as well.
And maybe even to encourage civic engagement with the goal of, greater civic engagement to affect positive change, or I don't know, something. And the city, does have a contract with a state lobby firm that can, we can utilize. The NAHAB could ask them to come and do a presentation or something, it might be a little extra cost, but.
So I think with these modifications, we're good.
So I'm hearing a few things. We're adding some language to support the communication of successes. So basically promoting, this was achieved. Another was to update and keep current the materials that are being placed on the website. And then we're adding a new bullet, to share the outcomes, basically analytics regarding affordable housing with the appropriate committees in the city.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. Okay, so we are modifying 14.1 with those modifications. So, let's see. All right. So 15, this was one where we identified some barriers and incentives during the last meeting. Barrier regarding financing is multiple factors contribute to housing costs. There's a broad menu of federal assistance and grants that are ever changing. Some of the strategies that were suggested were to provide information about available federal assistance, grants, and other helpful incentives on the city's website, coordinate with the Hometown Heroes Initiative, and seek financial compensation from the state when and where available. With that 15.1, we currently have diversify financial strategies to contribute to the new construction and maintenance of affordable housing. And then 15.2 is evaluate the feasibility of reducing paying code violation liens on lots suitable for affordable housing development. We did not make any suggested edits to this from our end, just because we felt like 15.1 was broad enough to cover everything that was discussed, although there's, of course, the option to add some more detail to that.
Go ahead.
I might add the barrier, when you've got the first bullet, multiple factors contribute to housing costs, and, a number of those are the cost of utilities, and we have in Greenprint 2.0, we have the goal of solar on 1,000 low and moderate income homes to lower their housing cost, their monthly costs of living. I would think that Greenprint 2.0 would fall under 15.1, diversify financial strategies to contribute, and maintenance of affordable housing. And this is if you've got if you own your home, or if you are a affordable housing apartment complex and you have solar and you're reducing your operational costs, hopefully you would reduce your rent for your tenants. But so there's that one thing, and it's minor, and it's kind of, it can fall under 15.1 if somebody knows about it. The other thing is, under strategy, we don't have anything there about putting more money from general funds, it's like looking for money elsewhere, federal grants and other incentives. The Hometown Heroes is the state, seek financial compensation from the state, but we could also put in more money of our own.
Amanda, to clarify, is this slide that's currently showing going to be part of the report?
No,
It's just a recommendation,
but I will
right?
say that it will be summarized
Okay.
in paragraph format within the report. This is just for discussion in terms of how it's presented here, but the points will be summarized in the report.
So, Kathleen, would you like 15.1 to be modified to reflect the possible increase of general funds coming to affordable housing? Because that's where it would fall. Diversify financial strategy to contribute to the new construction and maintenance of affordable housing, including the possibility of increasing. Is that where you would want to see that?
It could be, because, the biggest thing is, there's not enough money for affordable housing, right? And so that's the number one issue. And this is one little sentence: diversify financial strategies to contribute to the new construction and maintenance of affordable housing. Fantastic. What does that even mean? Where do we even start, to get more money? Pete, you've been pretty quiet. Where's the money going to fall from the tree for this stuff?
Well, I'm going to probably shock everybody right now, but it's not just money, okay? It's not just money. It's land. Going back to the number that Chuck started at the very beginning of this meeting. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chuck. In 5 years, 854 units of affordable housing have been built. I'm not being negative here. I'm just asking a question. From the numbers you gave us, there were 40 new single units, new family units, and 262 new rental units. That's new. Those are the only two categories that had new units. So that gives us a total of 302 units in 5 years. That gave us 8 homes per year, okay? And 52 rental units per year. It's not money.
It's worth.
Where are you going to put them? If I give you all the money in the world, where are you going to put this stuff? No, you're not going up. You're not going up. Not what just happened down in Fort Myers. You're not going up on the coast. So to me, and for all the time we've spent on all of this, I'm starting to really begin to think Clearwater proper, does a very good job dealing with homelessness and affordable housing within the confines of what they have to work with. The bigger problem exists in Pinellas County. And if we can't get Clearwater and St. Pete and Pinellas County into the room to say, how can we do this? It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry, I'm not a negative guy, but I don't see it happening. I don't see why we can't get all these, the major cities together with the county and say, look, is there enough land somewhere, and I know there is somewhere in Pinellas County, can we designate this? Can we work with developers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 developers, and say, look, this is what we need. We need 1,500 homes to be built that will be, here's the plans. We'll give you the plans. We'll design them to code. You have a 2-bedroom home, a 3-bedroom home, duplexes, whatever, townhomes, and then let's get this many units built along with the schools that are needed, along with the infrastructure that are needed, and then guess what? Maybe, and here's the other thing, they have to be affordable. They can't be more than X amount of dollars so that school teachers and policemen and nurses and office workers can afford to get into them. Then maybe, just maybe, we make an impact because we have a master plan, and then a lot of these other problems are taken care of. I don't know. All I know is I asked for those numbers, you gave them to me, and it confirmed what I have, after 15 years of doing this, believe. The city's doing as much as they can, and it's not just money. We got no land. So something has to happen to fix that. That's all I got.
And we can have this conversation when we have.
That's what I was waiting for.
They have meeting. Because we have to finish this first in order to get to that. So going back to that recommendation.
We can leave it. It can fall under there.
Okay. So we'll continue both 15.1 and 15.2.
Right. Now we're getting into partnerships. So this is where a lot of third-party factors came into play. We had investors, DPA loan issues, insurance, et cetera. Some of the barriers were investor real estate driving up the cost or competition for affordable housing, down payment assistance loans, and the length of time for inspections or closing, which I think you're going to go into more detail at a different time about. Third-party factors such as insurance and taxes, which is every year it just keeps going up. Strategy, move inspections early in the process or basic inspections, pre-approval for first-time home buyers, and then some third-party factors are just not within the city's control in terms of being able to control them. So the recommendations I highlighted here, recommending no changes to these, but just pointing out where these fall in terms of them being addressed already in 16.1. We have developed public and private partnerships for the provision of affordable housing. The fourth bullet there talks about engaging lenders in ongoing discussion with the city relative to underwriting and credit standards, technology solutions, as well as the development of financial products in an effort to maximize the financing options available to potential first-time home buyers through conventional and other lenders. That's related, and maybe not exactly hitting the topic, but related to the topic. And then I'll come back to 16.1 if we need to, the first slide, if we need to look at it. But then also there are a couple others in here, increased down payment assistance loan amounts to be viable for the home buyer while remaining financially feasible for the continued operation of the city's program, and then partnering with private sector and nonprofits to address third-party barriers, such as insurance costs for homeowners. So these are touched on, maybe don't go directly to the issues that were identified, but there are some sub-bullets that have some relationship to those topics.
I know there's one discussion that we had last month, and Lindsay's not here, so Robin, you're gonna have to back me up on this, that I don't think are necessarily fall under this, and it may be helpful to add a bullet point to address the need for that inspection that you ladies were talking about last month. I think the conversation was basically said that there's a specific inspection that's needed in the city of, within the city of Clearwater for a DPA loan that is not needed in certain other municipalities. So maybe the way to say it is just to add a bullet point that says, consistently monitor and update policy for DPA loan to be, I don't really know how we would even end that.
Yeah, so that inspection is actually needed. There's really only one or two local municipalities, if you go out as far as Pasco, Hillsborough, and Manatee. There are really only one or two that don't require that housing quality standards inspection, and that's the city of St. Pete and possibly Pasco County.
Okay.
Everyone else does require it. The question is, when does it get done? Because in a real estate contract, there's an inspection period. And thankfully, with the way the market has moved, now that inspection period has become longer again, because there was a time when that inspection period over the last couple of years was like 5 days. So, I know, thank you for that.
To get it done and read it and then try to address it.
Exactly. So a homeowner would, put it, or a potential buyer would put in an offer. They'd have 5 days to get an inspection done, read it, send it to the seller and say, this is what I need. Or not send it to the seller, but say to the seller, this is what I need repaired. When you do these down payment assistance programs, City of Clearwater being one of them, the city's inspection is not done until within usually about a week before closing, which in this instance, with getting the City of Clearwater's assistance, could be 60 days from the time you make your application, or you have your contract. So now everything has been done, and now you're telling the seller, oh wait, the city says that A, B, and C have to be fixed, and the seller's like, well,
we're not in the inspection period anymore. Right. So would it be helpful to add verbiage that would recommend and/or require that all inspections that are needed for the DPA loans happen during the inspection period?
Isn't that on the previous
Can we
slide?
even do that?
So the previous slide had engaged lenders in an ongoing discussion with the city relative to underwriting and credit standards, technology solutions, as well as the development of financial products in an effort to maximize the financing options available to potential first-time buyers.
Because really that's what we're talking about, is we're talking about the fact that that inspection is required outside, it happens outside of the inspection period.
It does. But to look at it from the city's standpoint for a second, the city doesn't request the inspection to be done until they have approved the potential buyer. So, because it costs the city money, the city pays for that inspection. So now you've had the city do an inspection early before they're 100% sure that they're going to give that buyer, the money. So is the city willing to pay $200 or whatever it costs the city? I don't even know what it costs the city anymore. But is the city willing to pay for that up front to make sure, before they know that the buyer fits their criteria? That's a question as well, to look at it from the city's standpoint.
So now, there's already a 4-point inspection, correct?
Yeah.
So can that other inspection be just eliminated and just use the 4-point inspection?
So, no. So the city of St. Petersburg actually doesn't even look at the 4-point inspection. The city of St. Petersburg looks at the entire home inspection and basically says, I'm going with the city of St. Pete for a second. The city of St. Pete says, anything that the inspector has noted that must be fixed, must be fixed.
For the DPA.
For the DPA, whether it's code or not. The housing quality standards inspection is code. So a 4-point inspection just says, does the HVAC work, does the, is there electric, water, right, that kind of thing. That's not gonna say whether or not the house is up to code. And the housing quality inspection, the housing quality standards inspection is basically code, and it's really Section 8 code.
Okay.
So,
But if we allowed the city to pay, and we only have 10 or so a year of single family.
Let me answer that question. So what happens is we'll do the inspection. If the loan doesn't close, we have to pay that out of our admin. If the loan closes, it's a project cost. Our admin is very valuable. That's how we pay our salaries. That's how we pay consultants like Amanda Warner. So yes, it's a short amount of money that we can absorb in our admin, or we have some limited unrestricted funds. So yes, we can move. I believe we can move that inspection up to an earlier in the process and take that risk.
Okay. Is that something that needs to appear in here, is my question, or is that something that we just need to discuss and maybe vote on at the NAHAB?
It's really up to the committee's discretion on whether to call it out in here. You already have policy in here regarding down payment assistance, however, it's not specific to that issue.
Right.
So if you wanted to add language to consider or investigate or look at, of course, that's something you could do, considering it is identified as a barrier.
Okay. So what does the board think? Yes?
Include it,
Okay.
yeah, let's help it out, yeah.
Okay. So can we come up with something that would cover that?
Yeah, so I'm thinking we add a new bullet in this area where it's highlighted, probably after the sentence that begins increased down payment, adding a bullet after that one, or tying it into that same line regarding the timing of inspections to facilitate.
Okay, perfect.
Closure.
Will that be satisfactory for everyone? Okay.
yeah, because I think, even, like I said, nowadays with contracts, now they're actually going back to about 10 days of inspection period. So if the buyer's lender already knows that I'm going to apply with the city of Clearwater, we can get that information right away to the city of Clearwater to go out and do the inspection.
Okay, great.
Can I say one thing about the first bullet on 16 point, continued, coordinate with Pinellas County joint programs for the provision of affordable housing, including the Pinellas County countywide housing strategy and Advantage Pinellas Housing Compact. I would encourage you all to print out, I have a whole stack of them printed on hot pink, that Advantage Pinellas Housing Compact, because it has all sorts of lofty statements, and it's only 3 pages long, but we need to hold people accountable in the county for those lofty goals that don't have measurables, and it can be an important document, it has the potential, but only if people use it and stand up. Yeah.
Excellent.
All right. So anything further on 16.1 other than the modification in direction to add a new bullet or incorporate the timing of inspections to facilitate closing?
I think we're good.
Nothing else? Okay, all right. So moving on, we are finished with all of the incentives. So that addresses all of the incentives that were required by statute, as well as the incentives that our AHAC initiated. With that, just to remind you, the next meeting will be November 7th. That's the day before Election Day. And with that, what we will be doing on our end is putting all this together in an updated LHIS report. So the 2021 that you looked at, we'll go through, update all of that, provide the background information for how the recommendations were considered, as well as the revised language and strike underline. We'll bring that back. I'll have that to Chuck in advance of the meeting, so you'll have time to review it. You will have ample time to review it. And then it'll be considered on November 7th, and that will be held in a public hearing format. I know there was discussion about the time change and everything, and I believe staff will look into that and get back to you with further direction. But for now, it's scheduled for November 7th at this time. So with that, I think that's all I have. If you need any assistance, reach out to Chuck. He can also get me any other comments that you have in the meantime, but we'll be working hard to put that document together and get it back to you. Thank you all for your time today and for the very detailed and in-depth discussion of these important incentives.
So you'll all have access to that through, when I send you that agenda with the various links, it'll all be in there. When that's posted, you'll get it immediately. Okay.
Thank you for the links
Thank
you
you.
provided to those other documents.
That was very helpful.
Anytime, happy to do so.
Okay, does anyone from the public wish to speak on this item?
I have a comment.
Okay.
This is from El-Haj Mohammed Abdur Rahim. Hello. Thank you for your important work to define recommendations for addressing our housing crisis. Your work is important every year, but even more so this year, given the huge lack of housing that even people with average means can afford due to skyrocketing rent, home purchase costs, and utility bills. In your upcoming meeting, please discuss and then provide clear new actions that the city can take in the following areas. Allow affordable accessory residential units in residential zoning districts. This can greatly increase the supply of affordable units in Clearwater and would be a great complement to existing strategies of building new affordable housing that the city owns. St. Petersburg has already done this and could provide a model for Clearwater. 2, ensure funding is allocated to assist home buyers, renters, and existing homeowners. Down payment assistance, rent assistance with a security deposit, utility deposit, 3 months rent to prevent homelessness. Owner-occupied rehabilitation assistance, energy efficiency assistance. Please take actions now in these areas. You have tremendous responsibility to provide direction to the City Council of Clearwater that can have a huge impact in our community. Thank you. Peace be with you, upon you.
So I believe we addressed most of that, and then some of it will be addressed at the NAHAB meeting as well. So thank you for reading that comment. Awesome. So item 4 is citizens to be heard regarding items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here to speak to items not on today's agenda? Seeing no one come forward, I'd like to ask Mr. Lane if he has anything to report to the committee.
No, I think we're good. I think we're going to move on to the NAHAB meeting.
Awesome. So our next AHAC meeting is scheduled for Monday, November 7th, 2022 at 9 a.m. here in council chambers, unless there's a change, which that would be communicated. We have already talked about this, but we're changing that date to our usual Tuesday meetings to a Monday because of Election Day. Just wanted to remind everybody. That's it. Our meeting is adjourned. I will ask members of the AHAC to step down from the dais so we can call to order a meeting of the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board. We're going to take a quick break, and we will start that meeting at 11:30. Are we taking all the things that we mentioned at the AHAC meeting last month and putting that on agendaing that on a future?
Yeah, let's just talk about that when I have the director report.
Okay, let's do that.
If you want to do it.
It's 11:30.
Okay, perfect. Today's meeting of the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board is called to order on October 11th, 2022. Welcome back, everyone. The agenda for today's meeting is on the wall at the entrance of chambers. Please remember to turn off your cell phones. To ensure a complete record of the board's action, we ask that any individual or each individual wishing to speak clearly state your name and spell your last name for the clerk. I will ask the board members to introduce themselves and identify the fields they each represent. I'll start with you, Robin.
Robin Field, Residential Lending.
Ms. Santiago, representing the people.
Kevin Schnall, representing the nonprofit industry.
Pete Scalia, representing the homeless population.
Gabriela Camacho, representing Affordable Housing Builder.
And I'm your board chair, Camille Hepting. I represent employers in Clearwater. 2.1 is approval of minutes. That's our first order of business. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the board's August 9th, 2022 meeting?
I make a motion.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Item 3 is citizens to be heard regarding items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here to speak to items not on today's agenda? Seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to the next item. 4.1 is new business items. Recommend City Council approval of the third substantial amendment to the City of Clearwater 2019-2020 Annual Action Plan to reallocate existing funding provided by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development to address needs resulting from the COVID-19 emergency. Mr. Lane.
Thank you. For the record, with the new meeting, Chuck Lane, Assistant Director, Economic Development Housing Department. So this is to amend our CDBG CV plan, okay? And that is money that was given to us from the federal government to address the coronavirus. It was given to us very early on. We had two different payments in 2020, totaling $1,351,560, okay? So early on when we did this, we stood up a business assistance program. We thought we could use a lot of CDBG money to do that. As the guidance came out, it became more and more difficult to use CDBG for that purpose, and we spent very little money on that. It was $2,000. We amended the plan later, and at the time, the county was just getting started on a rental assistance program, countywide. So we didn't want to spend any money on that. That's a very staff-intensive program. So we said the county's doing that. What we can do is we can do the other segment. We can help with mortgage assistance, right? People falling behind on their mortgage, foreclosure prevention, homeowner counseling. You know, on the homeownership side, there's a lot more to it than on the rental side. You just write a check on the rental side. On the homeowner side, there's more things. You know, you can talk to the bank, you can negotiate. So we stood up that program. We thought we'd spend a great deal of money on it. We put in, we had a contract with Tampa Bay Community Development Corporation, now Suncoast Housing Connections, $500,000 in assistance payments. We spent very little of that. We're very surprised that we won't be able to move that money. You know, throughout the pandemic, we know that nonprofits have had difficulty in spending the money, the capacity issues. We're seeing it, you know, I saw a state presentation recently, and throughout the state, I think the average CV spend was about 19% of each of the allocation. It's just not going out the door. When this agenda item was written, we were at, I think, 14%. The number was 200 and, it's somewhere in here. It was 207,000. Now we're up to about 322,000. So we're about a quarter of the money we've spent. We have to spend 80% of the spend by June, or we have to give money back, right? So we have to really change this plan and create strategies that will spend the money and be effective too. You know, the further we get from the beginning of the pandemic, the harder it is to connect a hardship to the pandemic, right? We see people being evicted, right? Is that because of the pandemic? We've had a housing crisis that evolved during the pandemic, but you can't really connect it. So we have to be pretty strategic about how we go about it so we stay in compliance, okay? So here's what we've done since the last amendment. So these are basically the categories of stuff that we're doing. Program administration, we're allowed to spend up to 20% of our allocation. That's $270,311. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Here? Okay. We're actually reduce that amount to fund some of the programs that we're proposing. If we don't spend all those funds, we can claw that money back into admin if we need to. So we reduced it by $58,695. Small businesses, we spent $2,000. We're not planning on doing any more of that. And this is the big nut. The emergency rental. This is generally through different organizations, primarily Tampa Bay CDC. We had $924,458 allocated to that. So we're reducing that pretty substantially. Now, understand too that we are getting into a contract with Clearwater Housing Authority for tenant-based rental assistance. They're going to use those funds to help people that are awaiting placement in their voucher program. Okay, so I think that's a good use of funds, and that amount is $321,400. So we're not just abandoning, helping with the rental assistance. We're still there. We're just targeting it towards the Clearwater Housing Authority. They're really the ones to do it. Okay, public services. We thought initially we'd really be able to move a lot of the money in public services, and that's where we've seen it come up short. So, but we are actually adding to it because of the contract that you saw recently with the Early Learning Coalition. That's going to, that's a big. It's $345,000, I believe. So that's what most of where that increase is coming from. And then probably the biggest change, and really it's a change in how we're approaching this. We're going to fund some public facilities projects. Two of them are with, or that's what we're proposing. Two of them are with our club, their facility in North Greenwood, and also in the Gateway. There's a system they can add to their HVAC system that kills the coronavirus as it rolls through the system. So that's a project we're going to fund. And then another specific, HUD doesn't give you a lot of specifics on what types of projects are eligible. One of the specifics they give us is if we create outdoor recreation, right? And we encourage outdoor recreation by creating opportunities. So we're going to invest in our Parks and Recreation Department at Ross Norton in our Lake Bellevue community. We're going to assist with the construction of a new playground, and we're going to assist with the construction of a pier in Lake Bellevue. So here's really what our budget looks like. You can see the Art Club activities up here at the top. You can see Ross Norton and the Lake Bellevue Pier at $190,000 each, and I believe that is just a portion of the spend on both of those projects. And then we get into public services. Suncoast Housing Connections, they are going to continue to be under contract with us for foreclosure prevention and mortgage assistance. Hopefully they can get rolling on that. The Homeless Leadership Alliance, we went under contract with them for housing navigation. They spent a little bit more money than that. Again, we created this budget a couple months ago, so to start this process. That's another thing. This substantial amendment takes 3-4 months. So that just eats into our time. Directions for Living, I think this is one of the most effective things we've done with CDBG-CV. If you remember, a private entity bought Prospect Towers, rebranded it, changed everything, made it a market rate product, and really was pushing people out, and we intervened. And Directions for Living was just aces in helping us manage that. We're still actually working on the final few residents that need help, but really successful. I'm really happy how that turned out. And we talked about Gulf Coast Legal Services, zero spend. They've actually spent some dollars since we created this budget, so they're moving along with spending those monies down. And that's pretty important with people facing evictions wrongfully through the pandemic. And then Early Learning Coalition, of course, we talked about that. And then the two other items you see are expenses early on in the pandemic that we're no longer funding. And then we have our admin cost. We spent $65,000. We get another $145,000 left. And again, some of our admin costs we've allocated towards the other programs. So we'll see how that shakes out. So that's really what it comes down to. There's a total amount of the two tranches we got, $1,351,560. That number is ingrained into my head. And again, 80% of that needs to be spent by June. And I believe we'll be effective in doing that, particularly with these public facility programs, because we know the pier will be done shortly. The Art Club projects will. The playground might take a hair longer, but we'll get there. So, do you have any questions for me on the substantial amendment?
Just a few points of clarification, Chuck. Will you go back to the other document? So the emergency rental mortgage utility assistance, just to be completely clear, the reason why this previous amount that the department had set was not spent is mainly because Pinellas County has such a robust assistance program that the city didn't really need to assist many people with
Yeah.
those funds.
Particularly specifically on the rental side.
Okay.
So we tried to focus on the home ownership side so we could capture citizens in both categories.
Okay.
And it just never took. We did a Facebook, web, what's it called? Facebook Live. I'm not a Facebook guy, so, yeah. But I was on Facebook Live and with Fran Feeney. And it just, we tried and then they've tried and we just haven't yielded a lot of people that came for help, which was surprising.
And now is going to be, if somebody came forward now, it would be very difficult to link their inability to pay or their need for assistance to the pandemic.
It can be, yeah. The further we get from it, it's harder to make the connection.
So it's smart to make that move. Now, the second question, just for clarification, that I was going to ask is in your other document. The Art Club projects were projects that were presented to the NAHAB as part of other funds that were not CDBG CV. And correct me if I'm wrong, we were able to move their allocation to the CV funds because they were directly linked to COVID, correct?
Well, actually, both of these facilities underwent a public facility improvement with regular CDBG in the last fiscal year.
Okay.
Okay, and one of them we're still working on. We had some issues with the floodplain, and so it's still under. But these are they're the same facilities, but it's a CV. It's a different project.
Okay.
So.
Just additional?
Yeah.
To help them additionally?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions from the board at this time? Okay, so you need first, does anyone from the public wish to comment on this item? See no one come forward. May I have a motion to approve item 4.1?
I so move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. 5 is old business items. Do any board members have anything additional to report? Okay, item 6 is director's report. Mr. Lane, do you have anything additional to report?
Just to close the loop on what you want to bring forward in a future agenda. So the items that I have written down, the DPA discussion, I think we can do that. I think Terry would give a great presentation to you all. So we'll agenda that.
I'm sorry, D what?
DPA.
The Down Payment Assistance Program. The question was asked in the last meeting, are our incentives effective? So I can probably give you a brief description on that at a future meeting, if you'd like.
I think it would be helpful to agenda it, even if it's just to have a conversation around how did this board want to measure the effectiveness of some of the incentives? Because we may have a certain way that things were being measured before or not being measured before, but it would be nice to have a conversation around what do we think is an appropriate way to measure some of these incentives and their successes.
Yeah. I will put together a presentation on that. There was discussion on this board potentially consolidating with the AHAC and having one year-round board versus the two separate. Would you like me to get some feedback internally before we and report back to the board before we hash that out? That is a policy-level decision, and really more than anything, the reason is because we would have an elected official on a year-round board. Now, I don't have any objection to that. I think Ms. Beckman brings a lot to the table. I think you all realize that. Mm-hmm. But that's not common practice in what we do. So that's something I'll need to get direction from the city manager, city attorney would weigh in, and probably the council would need to authorize that.
I think the bigger question is, and that's a conversation, that's the note that I made at our last meeting was, I don't think many times we discussed a difference between what the NAHAB is and what the NAHAB is meant to do and what the AHAC is and what that board is supposed to do. And I think if we had clarification on that, whether it's today, whether it's at another meeting where we discuss at length what the differences are, what the goal or the mission of each of these committee is, it would be a lot easier for us to realize that we either need to keep them separate or need to make them, one. there's a lot of times, and we've seen that last meeting and today at the AHAC meeting, that we start conversations that should be happening at the NAHAB, that are happening at the AHAC because of the people that are sitting on the board, and it's just us plus, right? So I think the first step would be to discuss that just with this board, what those main differences are, just clarifying everything for the public watching these meetings as well, before we move forward or not move forward with the decision of going to city council for should we, consider.
Okay, I will say that and I don't know if this is true, or I don't know anything about this, if the city manager is not willing to present that option, and he may be perfectly willing,
Right.
but if he's not willing to present that option to the council, it's kind of a non-starter.
Right.
So let me work internally first and see if he's willing to, he and the city attorney are willing to do that, and if they don't have an objection to it, then we'll have a discussion, and then you can arrive at a recommendation for council that I would present.
Right, and I don't think that's even necessary before we discuss the differences, because we may just be confused, or there's members of the AHAC and the NAHAB, or members that overlap that may be confused as to it's the same thing or they're different.
So regardless of whether or not this progresses, you want to talk about the differences between the board obligations?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think that would give us better guidance, and at least in our mind, as to whether that recommendation would actually come forward from us.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, good.
I don't know that at this time I'm comfortable with making the recommendation or asking this board to make the recommendation to go to the city manager for that question when we haven't even discussed, whether it's even appropriate from our standpoint.
Okay. So I will prepare something for the next meeting.
Thank you.
And the time of the meetings, you all support looking into evening meetings rather than our typical?
I do, because I think that obviously the lack of representation from the public, it's because of the time that we meet, it's not because people are not interested in affordable housing, so I.
And again, I think there's a big difference between what the NAHAB does and what the AHAC does, and I think that it may be helpful more for one than the other to have evening meetings, especially if we can't move both meetings to evening, and we may have board members that are not available in the evening, so that's going to be a conversation to have. But until we have that discussion about what is the goal of each board and how do we want to engage the public in both of the instances, it's going to be really hard to make a recommendation to either, look to move that or not.
So we're maybe merging those two discussions into one
Yeah.
discussion.
Right.
Because I know in the however many years I've been on this board, we really have only had public comment once or twice. And most of the time, that public comment was on items not on the agenda even. And if there was something they wanted to bring forward, they made a point of being here. Now, yes, this board has gotten a lot more focused. And our conversations are more beneficial at this point to the general public. Initially, we were just approving things the city staff had done, so there wasn't a whole lot of conversation from the public. I'm not saying, if we were in that way, I would recommend keeping it the way we are. But with the conversations we're having now, we are creating points and conversations around impact on our citizens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's also a point that was made earlier in our previous meeting about e-comments, and that's something we didn't have a few years ago. That is something that I think has been underutilized. I think it would be, it was, for some of us, it was the first time that we even heard about it. So it's definitely something that we have to consider as well. There's going to be people that will have comments to make that can make them ahead of time via email or via e-comments, and I would prefer that than to come and sit in a meeting that may last an hour and a half. But there's still going to be certain citizens and residents that prefer to come in person and prefer to speak in person. So we just have to consider all of those options.
Yeah, I think you were the only member of the board that was here when I started in this role, Kevin. And I think all of the additions to the board have been very, Ms. Santiago, I think you were there as well. I'm sorry. I think all of the additions to the board have really contributed to what Kevin just described. I thank you all for that, and I'll take credit for it.
Absolutely, 100%. Okay, Mr. Lane, anything else to report?
Nope, that'll do it.
Okay, awesome. Item 7 is board members to be heard. I'm looking around to see if there's anything additional. Okay. Next is adjourned. So our next NAHAB meeting is scheduled for Monday, November 7th, 9 a.m. here in council chambers. As we discussed at the earlier meeting, we will have a third and final AHAC meeting that day. And then unless the staff canceled the NAHAB meeting, it will be called to order at the conclusion of the AHAC meeting, as we did today. We are adjourned. Thank you.